I bought my parents a $450,000 house, locked the door, and left a note. When I returned, my sister and her husband had moved in, claiming it was theirs. Ethan is my name. As the oldest child and the one who repairs everything, I am 36 years old. I work as a neurosurgeon. I live in a suitcase at home and a locker at the hospital. At 3 a.m., I keep track of my life, schedules and/or pages. I'm not a big drinker. When I can, I run. Since I was raised on overdraft fees, I save practically all of my earnings. We'll see you next month. I was the child who translated adult fear. When I was 10 years old, I would respond, "It'll be fine," as my mother sobbed over unpaid rent. I discovered the form of emergencies and the flavor of terror. I became useful. My parents celebrated their 48th wedding anniversary a week ago. I hoped they would actually win. A location where nothing reminded them of discounts or used furniture, the floors didn't squeak, and the air smelled like salt. Above the lake I discovered a little blue home, warm, although a little twisted, windows that sing when the wind blows in from the bay, a white deck and 2 palm trees outside, $450,000. I loaded the refrigerator, locked it in their names, set up the utilities, and concealed a note in the cutlery drawer for loud laughing and late mornings. I adore tea. I kept it a secret from everyone, including my sister. I brought a bottle of sparkling cider and a cake with me when I drove over that day. I was stupidly thrilled because the sky was that annoyingly lovely, and the ocean was clear. An SUV belonging to someone else was already parked in the driveway when I pulled in. That was incorrect. Its front door was ajar. The wind caused the screen to slam. I entered. In the kitchen my mother was brandishing a dish towel as if it were a white flag. She had crimson eyes. With his hands trembling, his shoulders slumped, and boxes all over the place, my father sat in a chair. The corridor was filled with loud noises. In the living room, I hadn't even put on the kids' television yet. I hardly made it out. Mom, my brother-in-law Brandon, showed up with a football shirt, alcohol and bare feet. The plastic cake top sank into my palm as he positioned himself in front of my father, poked a finger toward the door, and roared, "This is my house. Get out." My sister Megan giggled from the couch. "Relax, Dad. We're just getting settled." Something got really silent inside of me. Before the room I loved became a battleground, I should give you the history. Megan is younger by 2 years. She was the artist in our home, followed by the free spirit and the "it's just a rough patch." My parents did what they knew, which was to downplay, protect, and sacrifice. I covered what I knew how to do. Before Brandon's startup launches, it was textbooks, then a semester, and finally a down payment for her first apartment. I had it in my wallet when the startup landed. Her oldest child's braces were paid for by me when their dental coverage had an odd deductible. When the bank refused, I took out a loan for a second-hand minivan. A lease was co-signed by me following the eviction. Some Venmo notes resembled journal entries. Every transfer seemed like control, as if I could smooth down the large, unsightly edges of our family. Megan's energy bill, Brandon's job interview suit, Mia's school trip, and rent once more, just this once. I was mistaken. In smaller, more obvious ways, my parents also assisted. Mom dubbed it cleaning out the pantry, as she loaded food into Megan's trunk. Dad gave Brandon access to his tools so he could practice fixes that ultimately cost more to perform. The chorus remained the same. I slept on call room mattresses and sent money over malfunctioning Wi-Fi at 2 a.m. throughout residency. You know your sister. Not everyone's like you, Ethan. You were born old. Because the locks will be changed in the morning, as the landlord has threatened. I became like a card that you swiped without considering the balance at some point. I planned it like a surgery when I discovered the beach location. With my parents as lifelong beneficiaries, I placed the deed in a trust. I used a separate account to pay my taxes for 20 years. I paid the HOA in full. I felt as though I was clutching a life raft as I gazed at the keys in my palm after changing the locks. So that they may weep in solitude and avoid drowning in attention, I notified Mom and Dad a week prior to the anniversary. Together we took a car down. Dad caressed the banister as if it were a violin he had owned. Mom let out a breath and opened each cabinet. We listened to birds while sitting on the terrace. Dad wanted to say something, but his voice cracked, so I replied, "It's yours. It smells like open windows and lemon," according to Mom. To test the plumbing, I spent the night on a blow-up mattress. Everything was successful. I went back to the city the following morning to do a decompression on a little child who had a plum-sized tumor. They retained the house. The system did what systems do in this situation. Megan gave Mom a call. The second day, Megan had triangulated the address from a fuzzy sunset shot in Dad's Facebook post by dinner time. Are you at a beach? Whose house? Mom, a horrible liar, said. Oh, we're visiting a friend. Our porch view. She came with Brandon, a dog, 2 children, and an air of entitlement that filled the driveway. Later, in a little voice, Mom told me over the phone. She replied, "We'll talk when you come down." By Saturday morning, my father was messaging some misunderstanding over the property. They just wanted to see it. Then they're staying for the weekend. Is that okay? I replied, it isn't a rental. Family home. Can you come? Megan asks repeatedly, but nothing happens. Then I was scrubbed in, so I didn't answer the phone. Next, the hashtag manifesting selfie that Megan took in my parents' kitchen with the tagline, "Home Sweet Home." Her buddies began to comment. One from Brandon. Beach era. So deserved. My palm began to ache where the scalpel handle sits for hours, and I thought, finally, a place where the kids can be kids. On my way home after surgery, I texted Dad. I drove right after being released with the words, "Don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything. Love you." I practiced calming phrases. Instead, I entered the open door and said, "We will reset this. We will breathe. We will set rules." Up here was already Brandon's voice. "You two are old. Stairs are dangerous. You'll fall. This is a family house. We're family. We'll manage it." Mom was trying. "It's Ethan's gift," he interrupted her. Megan didn't stand up. "He gave it to you. You're giving it to us, same difference." She only grinned. "Don't be dramatic, Mom. We'll handle the bookings, reservations." Brandon gestured to the vista. "Prime waterfront peak season. I listed it this morning. Easy money. During your time off, you two are welcome to use the basement." I examined my dad's hands. Like when he's angry and tries not to be, they were trembling. This is the same guy who used to work 3 jobs and yet managed to wear a filthy uniform to my high school symphony concert. In a house he had recently discovered was his, he was now being urged to move aside. I was brought up to be helpful rather than noisy. However, Dad's most recent text message contained a request that I was unable to submit later. The cake was placed on the counter by me. On that table with the beauty products and fast food bags, it looked absurd. When I did speak, it was steady. As if I were slow, Brandon rolled his eyes and asked, "Who told you this is your house?" Mom's face crumpled as Megan continued, "Family money, family house? Don't be weird. Sing song. We're not asking Tommy, we're updating." Brandon, pointing at my father once again, said, "Ethan, can you just explain?" Megan chuckled and said, "He can explain from the porch." My father's jaw twitched as he said, "Baby, stop. Dad knows we love him." Not a sound. Like a bayonet, something inside of me snapped into place. "Everyone to the living room," I said. "It's surgically loud. Not loud." The children stopped performing. The canines ceased tearing up a throw cushion. People like Brandon always thought the room belonged to them, so they followed even if he sneered. Under the framed picture of my parents cutting a store-bought cake 40 years ago, I stood by the mantel. My thumbs were able to sense my pulse. I spread out 5 documents on the coffee table after taking a folder out of my luggage. "Deed," I murmured as I tapped the first page that had been recorded the previous week. Brandon blinked as if the English words were doing something to him. "The property is owned by the AS and our Life Trust lifetime beneficiaries John and Grace, my parents with exclusive right of occupancy." I answered, in English. And he chuckled. "You don't get a key, Brandon." I tapped the second page and said, "Bro, try and stop me. Trust instrument, successor trusting. It gives me the duty to maintain the property for my parents' comfort. It also gives me the obligation to remove anyone who interferes with that." Megan's voice was dulcet. "Ethan, you can't be serious. We're helping." The third I slipped. A screenshot in color. "The Airbnb listing you just posted using photos you took without permission." The description. "Entire home. The house rules. No owner on site. The availability calendar. Booked out every weekend through August. The payout. Bank account ends in digits that match yours, Brandon." I blurred them for the kids. Brandon moved. "So what? The money could be used by your parents." "Dude," I wrote down the fourth. Megan didn't realize Dad had sent me a printed group chat thread from last night. It's a gloomy message from her. "We'll get him on board. He always caves if Mom cries. I'll guilt him about med school loans." Megan grabbed it and said, So excited to finally have a beach base. I put my palm over it. A laminated copy of the HOA regulations was the sixth item I put in place. I touched down on the clause. No short-term rentals. Here's what's going to happen, I said. Today, you will pack your belongings, remove the ad, text each and every reservation to inform them that the house is not available, and provide refunds. Megan blinked as if she had misheard. You're going to leave this house key on the table and apologize to Mom and Dad for frightening them in their own kitchen. Then she chuckled, high and trilling. Or what, Tommy? Or, I said, I will carry out my trustee duties. Brandon stepped up and shouted, duty this, puffing his chest as if we were 12. I kept it surgical because Mom said in a whisper, Brandon, please. I don't like yelling. I like precision. I placed my phone on the table and said, screen up. There was a draft email with attachments to the HOA board. A request to report the package for unlawful use, a second email to local council, and a third to the county recorder including the Airbnb link. When Dad sent that initial text message, there was some misunderstanding. Since I had phoned a locksmith named Victor from the highway, and he was parked 2 houses down. When Victor saw, he shifted his weight. You wouldn't. I said, I would, and I had already done it. Megan grabbed Mom. Mom didn't look at her when she said, Mom, tell him. Tell him this is family. Ethan, she continued, her voice wavering as she glanced at me. Brandon's expression softened as he said, do what you need to do. Using the same foolish motion that had set off the fuse, he pointed at the door once more. I moved between my father and Brandon and said, old man out. I've handled brains that pulsed like birds so my hands were steady. Silently, point at my father again, I whispered. And the only door you're going through is the one Victor is about to lock from the outside. Stillness. Not even the animated series. Megan made one final attempt. Saying, you're cruel, I breathed. You're abandoning your family. I am done being your wallet. That's not abandonment. That's a boundary. Brandon murmured. He reached for the folder and said, we'll see about that. Perhaps to seize the deed. Perhaps tearing up paper in that way could destroy a trust. I just grabbed the papers, put them away, and looked at Dad. I responded, Dad, and he gulped. Would you like to stay in your living room? No one moved when I said, yes. Then everyone who doesn't live here, go pack. The doorbell rang. Just in time, Victor. Because pandemonium typically takes longer to unravel than to start, it took 3 hours. Brandon had a tiny fit in the driveway as Victor replaced the lock, calling someone to check a legal matter, kicking at the curb, and whispering at Megan. The dog let forth a harsh bark. The children shifted like ashamed shadows, cramming clothing into tote bags and half observing me as though I were about to blow up. I didn't. I brewed tea in the kettle I purchased as Mom and I sat at the kitchen table. She continued using a napkin to wipe at her eyes. Her words were, I didn't want to tell you. I thought we could smooth it. They came in so fast. They said it would be easier for us this way. No stairs for your father, less to clean. They said they'd take over the hard parts. The hard parts are the parts that mean ours, I said. She gave a nod. Every time she apologized for the weather, I recognized the little guilty nod she gave. Dad gazed at the lake outside. He remarked, I thought I'd be stronger. I should have told them to leave. I responded, you called me. That was the strong part. I opened my laptop in the living room, logged onto my hotspot and canceled all of the unauthorized reservations. I noted that each customer's listing was deleted by the owner. A refund has been given. For the person who threatened a review, I have attached the HOA regulation. I sent neighbors a little note. You may have seen cars? There was confusion. There will be no short-term rentals at 24C Spray. Megan made at least 3 attempts to rephrase it. First pass. We were just excited for them. She sat with her face put in a gentle, painful position on a packed bag. I wanted the kids to be around their grandparents more. You know how you work. The second time. It makes sense if you think about it. You're never there. They're getting old. We're the ones with energy. Third pass. I didn't bite when I didn't protest. She sought blood. You think money makes you the parent, Ethan? It doesn't. You buy things so you don't have to be a person. She winced and then froze as I replied, I bought a house for our parents. I didn't buy a permission slip for you to steal. When she said, well, remember this. I hope so, I said. Brandon wouldn't give up the key. He grinned and said, come and take it, which would have been adorable had Victor not put the keypad lock in 10 minutes earlier. As Brandon saw all of his advantage evaporate in the sea air, I reached around him, hit the 0 button, and then reprogrammed it to a code Dad had selected. He attempted a different approach. "You think you're clever with your papers?" With evenness I said, "I know a guy." He looked at me as if he was trying to figure out whether I was lying when he said, "And your guy is about to tell you a trust beats a tantrum." No, I wasn't. Megan stopped on the porch when they eventually carried the boxes to the SUV. She said, "You could have just talked to me." "I have been talking to you for 10 years, I said. Her lips clenched. "You'll regret this when they need help, and you're not around." I watched Mom as she poured tea. I glanced at Dad's hand, which was at last still resting on the armrest, saying, "I'm around. For them." They took off in their car. The dog yaps at the glass as if it had a property law opinion. The temperature of the home altered after they departed. The air wasn't the same, yet it was the same. Through the screen, I could hear the sound of the ocean. My parents' respiration was audible to me. I gathered up juice cartons, a plastic tiara, 2 mismatched socks, and a garbage bag and walked from room to room. In the drawer of the guest room, I discovered a folded paper. Brandon's business strategy. 5 times the HOA fine was his expected monthly profit. Megan had scribbled in the margin, "Ethan won't say no if Mom cries." I dropped the paper as if it were a sharp object. Mom apologized again for the disaster. My constant refrain was, "It's just crumbs." Dad held me by the arm as the sun began to set. "Son," he said, "I don't know how to say this without sounding like I failed you both." I said, "You didn't fail us. You gave us everything you had. Just you gave too much to her for too long." We all did. Since the truth was a comfort, he agreed and refrained from arguing. I prepared a modest supper. On the terrace we dined. Because the mouse only left the flat on Sundays, Mom shared a tale about her first apartment and the mouse she called Bernard. Dad chuckled. I only hear him chuckle when he's not watching out for other people. My phone was buzzing like hornets. Megan texted. "You made Mom cry," Brandon said. An unidentified number that turned out to be Brandon's relative said, "Cease and desist, Dr. Boy. We're coming down next weekend, right?" We already invited people. I ate my salad and put the phone face down. I set the alarm for that evening. To please even my parents, I put a camera with a goofy smiling chime on the porch. With large letters that my father could see without his glasses, I placed the codes in a folder titled Happy Things. A drawer named Boring Armor has copies of the trust, the deed, and the HOA bylaws. Mom was standing at the doorway, her sweater pulled tight as I was leaving. She apologized. "I'm sorry it came to this." "I'm not," I said. "It needed to." Everything swayed like a table with one leg too short the following week. Within the family discussion, Megan launched a boisterous campaign. The grandchildren's house was stolen by Ethan. I got a ton of screenshots from cousins I hardly talked to. Megan's tales on Instagram. White letters on a blank backdrop. I didn't respond when he said, "When money makes you cruel." He then showed a picture of my automobile in the driveway with the words, "Some people think they can buy love." I constructed a little wall. Our aunt still says what she meant when I call her. I gave a brief explanation, saying that my parents own the house and it will stay that way for as long as they live. I implored her not to gossip about our suffering. "Finally, Ethan," she continued. And that was that. I sent Brandon and Megan a brief, courteous, and uninteresting email. I added 3 bullets. I handle all correspondence pertaining to the house. You are not authorized to be on the premises. The HOA and our lawyer will take action for any infraction. I configured the email to automatically reply to any further correspondence they may have on the residence. I made a self-promise to avoid negotiating with a tale that consistently has the same ending. After 2 days, a notice was sent. A new reservation request. Cottage by the Sea Spray. With a picture of the back deck, Brandon had relisted under a different account. With the deed and trust attached, I sent it to the platform's Safety and Trust. The listing was taken down 10 minutes later. The user has been banned. I didn't experience victory. After a game, I felt like I was just performing the duties of a stadium janitor. One morning, Dad called to tell me that he had slept through the night for the first time in months and that the home smelled like toast and salt. When I was 5 years old, Mom texted me a picture of her feet on the deck rail, her ankles crossed, and her bright pink nail varnish. I thought she looked like a movie star. They appeared light. Megan continued to hack at the wall in the background of all that tenderness. She used an app to send me a payment request for emotional harm. As your primary caregiver, she wrote in a letter she addressed to my parents, a statement that had never been accurate. Brandon shared a meme that looked like I took organs for cash, with a syringe and a dollar sign. The air in the small blue home remained unchanged by their loudness. Megan phoned from a block number one evening. Because I'm either hopeful or soft, I responded. When she heard my voice, she became silent. Then she attempted a whisper, a fresh strategy. Ethan, listen. We're behind. Brandon lost his contract. We're going to lose the apartment. The kids. I shut my eyes. Empathy turns into fuel at a certain point. Megan, I responded, I will not discuss the house. With her mask back on, she said, so money matters more to you than family? She hung up. Boundaries, I started, are how I can be family and not a bank. I allowed the stillness to linger like a recuperating patient, watched over, shielded, and in some ways, hurting yet recovering. I drove down early 2 weekends later. I have coffee in a thermos, and out of habit, I still wear a stethoscope around my neck. The water appeared to be at rest between breaths because of its flat silver appearance. A sticky door hinge was repaired by me. In order for Dad to draw the car in without hitting the wall, I placed tennis balls at the proper depth on the garage shelf. Dad likes labels, so I labeled the breakers. Mom laughed after making pancakes and burning the first batch. We talked about shopping, and Jan, the neighbor who keeps shells in a jar on the fence while we were seated at the table, regarding the pelican that refuses to be treated with respect. For an hour, no one mentioned Megan. The surface felt spotless. Mom stroked my hand after we finished breakfast. Her words were, I'm going to talk to your sister. Not to argue, to say no. When I stated, I'm not asking you to choose, I meant it. I'm not interested in that scorched earth thing where people declare winners. I want a peaceful porch for my folks. Mom gave a little smile. She remarked, it's not choosing. It's stopping the pretending. Dad cleared his throat. I should have taught that better, he said. I taught you to work. I didn't teach you to stop. You taught me to love and to stay, I said. He chuckled softly, appreciative. I'm just learning the without being eaten part. I tightened the gate lock after walking around the perimeter. I looked at the angle of the camera. A little placard for the entry table was printed by myself. The phrase, "Welcome home, John and Grace," was both cliched and perfectly appropriate. Later, when I was alone myself on the balcony, I considered what my sister might write for the headline if she were the owner of my narrative. I gifted my parents a house and ruined my family. That was not the case. I stopped paying the troll beneath the bridge, that's what occurred. I created a gift and then took care of it to prevent it from turning into a weapon. Giving away money, I used to persuade myself, preserved the peace. It didn't. As hatred brewed in the walls, it kept the noise level down. At first, boundaries are more audible. After that, there's a silence that nobody can pretend. The communications became slower. Megan shifted her focus to different audiences. Brandon discovered a new hill to lash out against. In their own lives, my parents began to utter little no's that sounded like yes. They began accepting early meals, naps, and pointing out boats with amusing names. No, we can't watch the kids this weekend. No, we can't drive across town to fix your car. After a month, I received a direct message from my 16-year-old niece who is wearing band shirts and has large eyes, saying, "The house is pretty. Grandma looks happy there." She sent me a laughing emoji and said, "Okay." It was a small ceasefire with someone who didn't do anything wrong. I replied back, "Come visit with Grandma's permission. No bookings, just pancakes." I needed to see the home lighted from the inside, so I traveled there last night after a late case. I could see my father reading in his recliner through the glass. The way he sat in our last flat, when the only light we had was the brightness from the TV, glasses slid down his nose. Mom had a puzzle on the table and a blanket on her lap. Under everything like bass, the sound of the ocean crept in. I didn't enter. Standing on the sidewalk, I let the silence to tell me what all of this was about. What I now know is as follows. Love isn't using your body to cover up someone's terrible actions. Because the person generating the turmoil is related to you, it is not applauding chaos. Love is like a home with locks and nice light. When people don't, love is like paper records. Informing your parents to take a break and informing everyone else that I am not their bank, scapegoat, or emergency escape when the fire they start becomes hot is what love is all about. I am their son, a brother who has finally realized that accuracy is appropriate at home, and a guy whose career requires it. My sister is welcome to join our parents in standing on this terrace and taking in the view of the ocean. She doesn't need a business strategy. She may arrive with nothing but an apology and empty hands. She doesn't have to adjust the thermostat to be a family member. And the home remains until then. The locks make a clicking sound. The girls quarrel. When the wind blows in from the bay, the windows sing. My folks breathe easily within. If there is a lesson to be learned, that is it. You shouldn't have to pay for a present. Furthermore, a limit is not inhumane. That's how love maintains its porch light without destroying the neighborhood. At 14, my parents made me sign a $600 rent contract or leave home. A week later, a lawyer's letter landed on their table, and their faces went pale. My mother told me one day when signing a permission card that now that I'm 12, I can buy my own school lunch. We're not made of money, and you should understand the importance of hard work. That's when Mother stopped purchasing me basic school materials. When I requested for fresh notebooks and pencils, she replied, "Figure it out. Other kids your age have jobs, so you should consider getting one too." I felt perplexed and embarrassed asking instructors for more materials as my father watched his costly sports package, which cost more per month than the whole school supply list. They had recently purchased a new 60-inch television but were unable to buy a $10 box of pencils. I started babysitting on weekends and walking dogs after school to cover the cost of basic essentials like clothing and food. The embarrassment of wearing too short pants and hole-filled shoes seared in my chest, but I attempted to seem normal. "Look at our little entrepreneur," Dad would say when I arrived home fatigued from work. "Maybe you'll realize why we can't just offer you whatever you want." I'd grin and nod while calculating how to make $25 last for a week of meals. By 13, they had stopped buying me meals and were ordering takeout twice a week for themselves. I'd arrive home hungry to find them devouring restaurant food and empty cabinets. Mom would tell you that you could get a job at the grocery store and purchase your own food like an adult while eating her Chinese takeout. The fragrance of their food made my stomach hurt. But I learned to stay in my room until they were finished, so I didn't have to watch them eat stuff I couldn't afford. I became better at money management than my parents ever were because I had to make every dollar count. While they impulsively purchased electronics and restaurant meals, I investigated each purchase and sought the greatest value. I developed a little business doing yard work and pet sitting that made great money. The irony was that as a teenager, I demonstrated more financial discipline than they did as adults. They still criticized me for being poor since I wore thrift shop clothing. Mom remarked it's humiliating to have a daughter who dresses like she's homeless when I wore a second-hand outfit to a family gathering. "People are going to think we don't take care of you." I wanted to shout since they didn't take care of me and hadn't purchased me clothing in 2 years. Dad would moan to his buddies about how costly children were, while I sat there knowing I had been financially independent since middle school. I extended my business and began generating real money by providing lawn care and pet services to most of the neighborhood. My parents acted as if my achievement was due to their tough love style. Dad would warn people, "Watch what happens when you stop enabling kids and make them work for what they want. She understands the worth of a dollar, unlike these spoilt brats whose parents give them everything," he added while drinking $40 bottles of wine and playing golf at the country club. But then Dad lost his job and their attitude toward money shifted dramatically. "We're having financial difficulties," Mom stated, and she asked if I might lend them money for groceries. "Just until your father discovers something new." I watched them panic about missing their mortgage payment while I had spent years budgeting down to the last penny. They had no savings despite earning a respectable living because they had spent every dollar on wants rather than requirements. Dad replied, "You've got all that money sitting in your account," when I refused to give them cash. During difficult times, family members support one another. I reminded him that when I was 12, I was supposed to help my family and eat peanut butter for dinner every night. "That was different because we were teaching you responsibility," Mom remarked, as if that made sense. "This is an actual emergency." They continued asking for money every few days and becoming angry when I declined. Dad stated, "You're being selfish and ungrateful after everything we've done for you," during one of his pleading bouts. "We could have booted you out years ago, but we allowed you to stay here for free." I explained that allowing your minor child to live in your home was the legal minimal obligation for parents. "Don't be clever with us when we ask for aid," Mom yelled back. I was calculating my funds and preparing to leave for college when both of my parents approached me in the kitchen with serious looks. "We've been discussing, and we believe it's time for you to begin contributing to household expenditures," Mom added, with Dad nodding behind her. "You're 14 now, and you earn a nice living, so it's only right that you pay rent." Dad approached with a contract in his hands. You may either pay $600 per month with utilities, or find another place to live. I glanced at the document Dad was holding, and my thoughts went utterly blank for a moment. The paper had official-looking headers and signature lines. $600 a month plus utilities meant that I'd be spending nearly all of my earnings, leaving nothing for food or emergencies. I quickly calculated the numbers in my thoughts. In a good month, I earned around $700 from my lawn care company and pet sitting. This house's utilities bill increased by at least $200 during the summer when they turned on the air conditioning. That would leave me with around $100 for everything else, including food, clothing, school materials, and mower gas. My parents were watching me as if they expected me to just sign. Mom crossed her arms and Dad held out a pen. I said I needed time to think about it and went to my room before they could protest. Dad called after me for being theatrical, but I closed and shut my door. My hands trembled as I brought out my budget notebook and ran the figures, which confirmed what I already knew. This would demolish all I've created. For the past 2 years I've been quite frugal. I've saved over $1,500 for emergencies and college application expenses. If I paid them rent, my funds would be depleted in 3 months, leaving me with nothing to cover the essentials they stopped supplying. I write out several situations, but they all finish in the same manner. There is no version of this that works without leaving me hungry or losing my business equipment. My eyes are moist, but I'm not sobbing, so the notebook pages are a little blurry. I'm simply upset and afraid, trying to figure out what to do. That night I lie awake on my phone, investigating whether parents may legally charge rent for their underage children. The answers are difficult and vary by state, but most authorities agree that parents have a responsibility to give basic assistance until their children reach the age of 17. Some forums have individuals claiming that when they were adolescents, their parents charged them rent, which was okay. Others believe it is neglect if the parents do not provide food and basics. According to a legal assistance website, parents are responsible for providing their children with shelter, food, clothes, medical treatment, and education. Charging rent may be okay if they are still supplying all of the other necessities. However, my parents have not purchased me food in over a year. They have not purchased me clothing since I was 12. I screenshot everything that appears relevant and store it to a folder on my phone. Around 1 a.m., I eventually fell asleep with my phone still in hand. When my alarm goes off, I'm fatigued, and my eyes ache from seeing small print for hours. The next morning, I inform my parents that I won't sign anything until I talk to someone at school about it. We're in the kitchen, and they're having breakfast that they purchased for themselves. Dad's face goes crimson, and he begins ranting about disrespect. He claims I am being ungrateful and that they have every right to charge me rent. Mom gets in, claiming I'm acting like a spoilt brat who believes she's too wonderful to serve her family. Despite my racing heart, I remain cool. I tell them that I just want to make sure I understand everything before signing a formal contract. Dad smacks his coffee mug on the counter, spilling coffee everywhere. He approaches me, but I take my backpack and leave for school early. I can hear him shouting behind me as I go down the driveway, but I don't glance back. My hands shake again as I unlock my bike. The trip to school generally takes 10 minutes, but I finish in about 7 since I'm cycling so hard. I'm hardly paying attention in my morning courses, trying to find out who I can trust with this. My math teacher is teaching something about equations, but I am simply looking at my notepad. In English, we're meant to perform group work, but I inform my group that I'm not feeling well and sit alone. Mrs. Carter, the school counselor, has always been friendly when I've met her in the hallways. So, around lunch I go to her office. The main office secretary inquires whether I have an appointment. I tell her it's an emergency, and she glances at me for a moment before picking up the phone. Mrs. Carter emerges a few minutes later and leads me into her office. She's presumably in her late 30s, has gray hair, and is wearing a cardigan despite the fact that it's warm. Her workplace features plants on the windowsill and encouraging pictures on the walls. Mrs. Carter listens to everything without interrupting, and when I'm finished, she appears really concerned. I tell her about being 12 when they stopped purchasing lunch and supplies, about working since middle school to finance food and clothing, about them ordering takeaway while I ate peanut butter, about the closed pantry, and about Dad's contract that I must sign. She writes in a notepad and nods. After I finish talking, she asks whether I feel comfortable at home and if my parents have ever been physically aggressive, which they have not. She inquires whether they've ever hit me or threatened to injure me. I tell her, no, they've never done that. They just stopped taking care of me financially, and now they want me to pay them. Mrs. Carter's countenance becomes serious, and she taps her pen on the desk. She says that, while she is not a lawyer, charging a kid rent raises severe concerns regarding parental responsibilities. According to her, parents are responsible for their children's fundamental needs until they reach the age of 17. If they charge rent yet do not provide food or clothing, this may be termed neglect. She opens a drawer and takes out several leaflets regarding free legal aid services. She asks if I'd be okay with her making some calls to link me with someone who can provide actual legal counsel. I tell her, yes please. I need help figuring this out. Mrs. Carter takes up her phone and walks outside for a minute. Through the window in her door I can see her chatting to someone and taking notes. When she returns, she informs me that she left a message with legal aid, and that they should call back within a day or so. I agree and feel a tremendous weight lift just by giving someone the truth. For the past 2 years I've been handling things on my own and pretending it's normal. Having an adult listen and take me seriously makes me want to cry, but I keep it together. Mrs. Carter also assists me in applying for free lunch directly in her office, something I should have done years ago but was too ashamed. She opens the form on her computer and assists me with filling it out. She thinks there's nothing to be ashamed about, and that many pupils utilize the service. The application inquires about household income and family size. Mrs. Carter assists me in explaining that my parents do not offer food money, despite the fact that they live in the house. She submits it online and states that I should be authorized within a few days. When I leave her office, I feel lighter than I have for months. Someone is aware, and assistance is being provided. I am not fully alone anymore. The next day, I meet with Daniel Lawson from Legal Aid, who explains that young children must be provided with food, housing, and basic requirements by their parents. Mrs. Carter scheduled the meeting and took me to the Legal Aid office downtown after school. Daniel seems younger than I imagined, possibly in his early 30s, wearing glasses and a tie. His workplace is tiny, with file boxes packed everywhere. He asks me to sit down and brings out a yellow notebook. He asks that I start from the beginning and tell him everything. I read the entire narrative again, and he takes notes throughout. When I reach to the section concerning the rental agreement, he stops writing and looks up. Charging rent may be deemed neglect if it hinders people from performing their commitments, he argues. He emphasizes that parents are legally obligated to support their underage children. They cannot just decide to stop supplying needs and charge rent instead. Daniel asks extensive questions regarding what my parents provide and what I pay for myself. When I mention everything, food, clothes, school supplies and toiletries, his look becomes more serious. He organizes everything into 2 lists: provided and not provided. The not provided list is much longer. He inquires about their salary and whether they are truly struggling financially, or simply prefer not to spend money on me. I tell him about the sports package, the golf membership, and the restaurant meals, how they had a lot of money until Dad was laid off a few months back. Daniel nods and continues writing. He inquires whether I have any proof of what I'm telling him. I show him images from my phone of their takeaway orders heaped in the garbage while my cabinets were empty, photos of the closed pantry, and my budget notebook, which shows every dollar I've made and spent over the last 2 years. Daniel examines everything attentively, and his jaw tightens. He shuts the notepad and settles back into his chair. Daniel assures me that this record is strong proof and just what we need if things worsen. He says that he may send my parents a formal letter clarifying their legal responsibilities as parents of a minor kid. The letter will highlight particular state legislation pertaining to food, housing, clothes, and basic essentials. It won't compel them to change their ways, but it could make them understand they can't simply push me out or demand all of my money. Daniel claims the letter will be professional and accurate, not threatening, but it will make it obvious that their acts may be deemed neglect. He asks whether I want him to email it, and I quickly agree. Having something formal from a lawyer gives me a sense of security I have never had before. Daniel prints out some information papers regarding my rights and instructs me to continue capturing everything. He also provides me with his direct phone contact in case things escalate rapidly. The meeting finishes with him promising to mail the letter within a few days. That evening, I was cooking up ramen in the microwave when my folks walked into the kitchen. They had that serious expression on their faces again, which indicates that they are going to corner me. Dad crosses his arms and asks whether I've considered the rent contract. I take a deep breath and explain that I spoke with a lawyer from Legal Aid. Mom's face turns paler, and Dad's jaw tightens. I explain that I've learned that parents must provide basic essentials for their children regardless of whether they pay rent. Dad's face goes crimson, and he begins ranting about how I am threatening them and making them appear like awful parents. His voice becomes louder with each phrase, and I can feel my heart racing, but I maintain a cool demeanor. Mom bursts into tears, accusing me of being ungrateful after 14 years of providing for me. She is crying to make me feel bad, but I have seen it too many times to fall for it. Dad approaches and yells, "I'm tearing this family apart over money." I remain cool and explain what Daniel told me. I'm happy to help with household tasks and contribute in acceptable ways, but I won't sign a contract that takes all of my wages. Despite the fact that my hands are shaking, my voice remains firm. I tell them I need the money for food and school supplies because they stopped supplying them years ago. Dad opens his lips to scold again, but I just turn and walk to my room. They are both shrieking about disrespect and ingratitude behind me, but I continue to go. I hear them rush off to their bedroom, slamming the door so fiercely that the entire house shakes. I lock my bedroom door and sit on my bed with my phone, informing Mrs. Carter that the conflict occurred and that I'm okay. She texts back right away, asking if I'm safe, and I say sure, but I'm rattled up. The home is silent for the remainder of the night. The following week passes with my parents rarely speaking to me. Then one afternoon, I'm at school when Daniel's letter arrives via certified mail. I know because when I return home that evening, the entire house seems changed. The air is dense and strained, and my parents sit at the kitchen table, documents strewn out in front of them. They do not glance at me when I walk in. They say nothing. I take a bite from the minimal resources I can find and head directly to my room. In some ways, quiet is worse than screaming. I hear them chatting in low, furious tones during supper, which I typically avoid, but I can't understand what they're saying. This goes on for days, with them treating me as if I'm invisible while simultaneously observing my every move. Mrs. Carter began checking in with me practically every day at lunchtime. She leads me into her office, where we work on creating a realistic timetable that combines school, job, and study time. My grades have been decreasing because I am too weary and anxious to concentrate on my assignments. She writes my instructors, explaining that I am struggling with family concerns, and assists me in obtaining extensions for missed tasks. We figure out which classes require the most attention, and when I can spend my leisure time to catch up. She also links me with the school's homework aid program, which provides free tutoring. Mrs. Carter creates a spreadsheet covering my complete week, including school hours, job shifts, study blocks, and even time for sleep. Seeing everything put out helps me realize how much I've been attempting to do alone. She prints one copy for me and maintains another in case we need to make changes. My neighbor, Mrs. Parker, has noticed that I am taking my lawn equipment to her garage more frequently than normal. One day, as I was storing my mower and trimmer, she came outside and asked whether everything was well at home. I offer her a sketchy response regarding my parents' financial concerns. Mrs. Parker glances at me for a long time, as if she's debating whether to press for additional information. She doesn't push, but her face suggests she understands more than I do. She notes that her garage has plenty of space if I want to store all of my equipment there permanently rather than just sometimes. I thank her and accept the offer, relieved that my pricey instruments are safe from my parents' interference. The next week, Mrs. Parker begins to give me more steady employment. She asks if I can mow her lawn every week rather than every other week, and if I can also help with some garden care. She pays me ahead for the entire month, which allows me to budget better and feel less stressed about money. While I'm working in her yard one Saturday, she offers me lemonade and casually remarks that her guest room is available if I ever need a place to stay. She says it in a light-hearted tone, as if she's simply conversing, yet her eyes are serious. I thank her and say how much I appreciate it. Having that alternative in the back of my mind helps me feel less confined. At home, things worsen in subtle ways. My parents lock the pantry door and begin counting each thing in the refrigerator. They do not legally refuse me food, but they make it plain what I am permitted to touch. Certain shelves in the refrigerator are off limits, and the pantry is closed except when they are present to oversee. It's their technique of managing my diet without breaking any evident restrictions. I go home from work hungry and find the cupboard shut with a note stating that they'll be home at 8. Meanwhile, I can smell their leftover Chinese food in the fridge. But I'm not supposed to touch it. I start capturing everything on my phone, as Daniel instructed. I snap images of the closed pantry with timestamps. I photograph the empty cupboards that I am permitted to enter, revealing that there is virtually nothing there. When my parents order takeaway, I photograph the bags and containers in the garbage. Then I take shots of my own meal, which is generally peanut butter on toast or simple noodles. I took a snapshot of our bank statements, which showed their restaurant charges. Every piece of evidence is saved in a folder on my phone and then backed up to a cloud account that they cannot access. Daniel responded, "Evidence matters if things escalate to court or child services. I never imagined myself creating a case against my own parents, yet here I am, snapping photographs in my own kitchen as if I were gathering evidence for a criminal investigation." Ryan Brooks comes by my register during a slow spell the following shift and leans on the counter. He watches me check my typical lunch items, which are the cheapest in the shop, and then looks at me with an expression of understanding rather than pity. He notes that they have opportunities for extra hours if I'm interested, and the income will assist with whatever I'm going through. I accept quickly since a more consistent income means less worry about paying rent or buying food. He instructs me to come by his office after my shift to complete the paperwork, and I thank him as I pack my crackers and peanut butter. I fill out the documents the same day, and Ryan assists me in updating my work permit to allow for longer hours because I am still 14. The new schedule begins later that week, with 3 weekday evening shifts and entire weekends, resulting in consistent revenue. But it also means less time for schoolwork, and I'm already behind in 2 subjects due to the stress at home. Mrs. Carter spots me falling asleep in study hall and pulls me away to inquire what's going on. I explain about the increased work hours, and she does not lecture me on priorities or advise me to quit my job, as some adults might. Instead, she assists me in creating a study plan that allows me to catch up on tasks throughout every free time and lunch break. She even talks to my instructors about project extensions so I don't become overwhelmed with late work. 3 days later, I get home after an evening job to find Dad standing in the driveway, arms crossed. Before I even get out of my car, he starts ranting about how he knew I was getting free lunch at school. Someone from church must have spotted my name on a list or something since he knows information I never gave him. He accuses me of making them appear like deadbeats who can't even feed their own child, and that my poverty act is insulting to the entire family. I try to move by him toward the home, but he blocks my way and continues to talk about how others at church are surely chatting about how bad their parents must be. His voice becomes louder with each phrase, and I notice Mrs. Parker's porch light turning on across the street. She walks outdoors and stands on her doorstep, arms folded, observing us. Dad spots her standing there and lowers his voice to an angry whisper, but I can see his jaw straining and his fingers tighten at his sides. He tells me the conversation isn't finished and goes back inside, slamming the door so forcefully that the windows rattle. The next weekend, I return home after cutting lawns to discover my equipment in the center of the yard, thoroughly saturated from the morning shower. My parents insist they had no idea it was going to rain and wanted to move the car out of the garage for errands. But my mower won't start, and when I inspect the engine, I notice water damage that will cost more to repair than the mower is worth. I sit on the damp ground, gazing at my wrecked equipment, and I feel like crying for the first time in months. This mower represented half of my company, and replacing it will require weeks of saving. Mrs. Parker arrives about an hour later and discovers me still sitting there, trying to figure out what to do. She stares at the wrecked mower and then at my parents' car sitting in the driveway, asking no questions about what occurred. She instructs me to bring all of my equipment to her garage right now, and that I may keep everything there permanently so that this never occurs again. I pick up my trimmer and other equipment and accompany her across the street, pleased that at least one adult in my life is willing to assist rather than sabotage me. Back at work, Ryan Brooks invites me into his office and offers me a permanent part-time employment with defined weekly hours and a minor raise. The steadiness allows me to manage my budget rather than scrambling for inconsistent yard job money. Every payday, I can depend on a particular amount to cover my meals and other expenses. He also says that employee discounts extend to groceries, which will make my food budget go much farther. That following week, I was rearranging my room when I noticed Dad searching through my belongings. My bank statements are out of order, and there are fingerprints on the documents in my desk drawer. I approach him about it, and he behaves as if it is his right to know what I am doing with my money because I reside in his home. Daniel's voice lingers in my thoughts as I consider keeping my funds separate. So I go online and set up a prepaid debit card account that only I can access. I transfer the majority of my money and set up direct deposit from work, so my parents can no longer check my income. Daniel stated that documentation is important, and this is an additional layer of security. Someone allegedly approaches Dad directly about the rent problem at church on Sunday morning since he returns home enraged by others chatting about our private affairs. He bangs things around the kitchen, while Mom sits at the table, humiliated and refusing to make eye contact with anybody. She repeats repeating they should never have said anything to anybody, but Dad claims they didn't, implying someone else is speaking. I sit in my room and listen to them dispute over who found out and how to deal with the stories that are now circulating in their social circles. Mrs. Carter sets a mediation meeting at the school on the following Wednesday with my parents, herself, and a district social worker. We all sit around a conference table, and the social worker explains that her role is to assist us in reaching a mutually beneficial arrangement. My parents instantly start complaining about how rude I have been and how I refuse to aid the family at difficult times. Dad brings up every perceived slight from the previous month, while Mom agrees and adds her own instances. The social worker listens intently before redirecting by asking what particular help my parents presently give. The room becomes silent as they try to mention genuine expenses outside the roof over my head. The social worker inquires about food, clothes, and school supplies, and my parents respond vaguely about teaching responsibilities. She asks me directly what I buy for myself, and I detail everything while my parents sit there, looking uncomfortable. After about 45 minutes of back and forth, we strike a temporary deal in which I will not pay rent for the time being, but will contribute by doing additional jobs around the house. The social worker documents everything in detail, including which duties, how frequently, and what my parents agree to offer in exchange. She prints copies for all of us and says, "This is a working agreement we'll revisit in a month." My parents sign it, looking unhappy but agreeable, and I grab my copy, knowing that this piece of paper would provide me with something formal to point to if they try to change the terms later. A few days later, I'm driving home from school and notice Dad packing his golf clubs into someone's car in the driveway. He passes over the clubs and accepts payment from the buyer before watching the automobile drive away with a sorrowful expression on his face. Inside, he is counting money at the kitchen table, and I hear him say something about paying the credit card company before they sue him. He doesn't ask me for money for the entire week, which seems like progress, even though I can sense he's sad over losing his golf equipment. Mom surprises everyone by saying that she has been recruited to work part-time at a retail business in the mall. She starts the next Monday and returns home that first day moaning about standing for 6 hours straight and dealing with nasty clients. Every evening after her shifts, she complains about being fatigued and her feet hurting. But it's strange seeing her work for the first time in years. The additional money is beneficial since we are eating cheaper meals at home more frequently instead of buying takeout. Mom cooks spaghetti with basic sauce, rice and beans, and inexpensive chicken meals. It isn't glamorous, but it means I won't be hiding in my room eating peanut butter sandwiches while they dine at the restaurant. I actually sit at the table with them throughout supper, which hasn't occurred in ages. Mom and I find ourselves alone in the kitchen one evening, cleaning dishes while Dad watches TV. She's scrubbing a pot and suddenly remarks that her parents were quite tight about money while she was growing up. She claims they made her account for every dime and never allowed her to buy anything pleasurable. It's not an apology, and she makes no reference to how she's treated me, but it's the closest she's ever been to explaining why she behaves the way she does. I just nod and continue drying the dishes since I don't know what to say. Dad receives a call for an interview at a warehouse across town, and his entire demeanor shifts. For the first time in weeks, he appears optimistic, discussing wages and perks while browsing the company's website. The anxiety in the house eases slightly as we wait to hear if he advanced to the next round. I used part of my funds to send my lawnmower to the repair shop since the engine has been acting strange. The man fixes it, and I buy better, longer-lasting equipment, a new trimmer and other professional-grade tools. Mrs. Parker sees me unloading everything and offers to let me organize her garage so that all of my business materials are in one location and easily accessible. We spent Saturday afternoon putting up shelves and hanging tools on the wall. She labels everything and even creates a scheduling board so I can see which clients want care each week. At work, Ryan Brooks begins teaching me about payroll and taxes during slow hours when there are few clients. He tells me how to read my pay stub and discusses the withholdings and deductions. He discusses budgeting tactics and how to plan for large costs. He treats me like a true adult employee rather than a child, which feels fantastic after years of being regarded as a burden at home. Daniel calls to check in and see how things are doing with my folks. I inform him about the mediation agreement, and he suggests we make a safety plan in case they try to push me out anyhow. He instructs me to write down Mrs. Parker's phone number, Mrs. Carter's mobile phone number, and the location of a juvenile shelter downtown. He tells exactly what to do if I return home and the locks have been changed or my belongings are vanished. Knowing I have a strategy makes me feel less anxious about what may occur. My parents began cooking at home more frequently. And one day, I realize the pantry's lock is missing. Mom really asks whether I want anything special from the grocery store the next time she visits, which is bizarre. I almost can't believe this is happening. She notes that I favor wheat bread and a certain type of peanut butter. It seems unusual yet fantastic to be able to eat like a normal child. Then I pass by the kitchen counter and notice the cable bill sitting there, with the payment amount highlighted. When I pick it up, I find that the sports package that Dad had canceled a few weeks prior has been reinstated. They're already reverting to their old spending habits after making so much progress by selling the golf clubs and reducing costs. The cost is about $70 more than it was, and they have not even addressed it to me. I put the paper down and walk back to my room, feeling the old irritation rise in my chest. They can't help themselves, even though they should be acquiring better money management skills. A few days later, I'm doing schoolwork in my room when I hear loud noises from the kitchen. Dad is angry over the bank issuing an overdraft warning, and Mom's voice grows louder, stating she had no idea the account was that low. I open my door and hear Dad accuse her of overspending at Target, while she responds with his bar tab from last weekend. They go back and forth, recounting every purchase the other person made, with neither accepting responsibility for their own expenses. The dispute lasts approximately 45 minutes before they both storm off to their own rooms, and I realize they have learnt nothing from the previous several weeks. The next morning, Dad approaches me before school and begins discussing how the home costs are rising. He thinks I should start contributing since the bills are too much for the two of them to bear. I take out my phone and show him a snapshot of our written agreement from the mediation meeting, the one that states no rent until I am 17. He goes crimson in the face, but I remain calm and inform him that we have already agreed on conditions. He mutters something about ungrateful children and goes away, but I can see he has other plans. That evening, Mom approaches me in the hallway with a phony, cheery look and begins discussing a new method she devised. She suggests that instead of calling it rent, we utilize chore credits, in which I earn points for domestic activities that contribute toward covering bills. I stare at her for a second before responding. That sounds exactly like rent with extra steps. And the answer remains no. Her grin fades and she huffs off to whine to Dad about how tough I am. I walk to my room and write Daniel about what just transpired. He answers within minutes, telling me to start documenting everything in detail. I open a new note on my phone and start writing down what food is now in the cabinets, when time my parents bought pizza for supper while I ate cereal, and images of the money they left on the counter to demonstrate their spending habits. Daniel responded, "If we need to escalate the situation, having solid evidence will protect you from their version of events." Every day, I make records, noting when they order takeaway, when the pantry contains food that I may use, and any comments they make about money or my alleged commitments. The documenting makes me feel less helpless since I'm creating a record of what actually happens rather than what they pretend. 3 days later, I'm at school when Mrs. Carter summons me to her office and displays an email she's writing to my parents. The message is professional and kind, but the warning is clear. If the agreed-upon requirements of our mediation are breached in any manner, she must file a formal report with Child Welfare Services. She asks whether I'm good with her mailing it, and I say yes, knowing my parents would be outraged but also understanding they need this boundary maintained by someone in charge. She presses submit as I'm sitting there, and I watch the email escape into the ether, bound for my parents' inbox, where it will undoubtedly spark an explosion. That Saturday, I was working my shift at the grocery store, replacing shelves in the cereal aisle, when I noticed Dad walking through the front doors. My stomach lowers because he's not here to shop, judging by the furious expression on his face and the way he scans the store for me. He notices me and goes straight over, his voice rising as he rants about how I'm making them look like bad parents and turning everyone against them. Customers are stopping to stare, and I can feel my face flaming with humiliation as he continues to shout about ingratitude and contempt. Ryan Brooks emerges from the back room and goes forward gently, putting himself between me and Dad. He informs my father, in a forceful but courteous tone, that he must leave the store. Dad starts claiming that he has the right to speak to his own daughter. Ryan does not back down. He just emphasizes that he must go immediately or Ryan will contact the police for making a disturbance. Dad appears to want to dispute further, but something in Ryan's expression causes him to spin around and rush out, throwing the door wide so forcefully that it smacks against the wall. I'm shaking so much that I have to sit on a step stool, and Ryan and Jessica walk over to check on me. Ryan responds, "You did nothing wrong, and we have your back completely," as Jessica takes out the incident report form and begins writing down everything that happened, including timings and details. She informs me, matter-of-factly, that if Dad returns to the business, they will not hesitate to contact the police for trespassing. Knowing they're serious about protecting me makes me feel more secure than I have in months. After my shift, I went directly to Mrs. Carter's house because she provided me her address for emergencies. I tell her everything about the shop incident. Her expression becomes more disturbed as I speak, and when I finish, she says she has to file that complaint with child welfare right away, since my father coming up to my employment to confront me crosses a significant line. The next day, a woman called Ms. Donovan contacts my mobile phone and presents herself as a caseworker, stating that she wants to organize a house visit to examine the issue. My entire body feels chilled and relieved since I sought assistance, but I'm also concerned about what occurs next, and whether this will exacerbate the situation. Ms. Donovan organizes the visit for Thursday afternoon, saying she'll need to talk with me privately, check the house and go over some financial information with my parents. When I notify my parents about the visit, they jump into panic mode. Mom begins deep cleaning each area as if we were prepared for a military inspection, scouring baseboards and arranging closets that had not been touched in years. Dad advises her on what to say, preparing responses about how they offer everything I need and saying that I'm overreacting to regular family arguments. I listen to them practice their version of events and decide not to participate in any of it. When Ms. Donovan arrives on Thursday, I want to give her the truth gently and let her form her own judgments based on facts rather than my parents' spin. Thursday arrives, and Ms. Donovan arrives on time. A lady in her 40s with a professional but kind approach, carrying a tablet and briefcase. She starts by asking all three of us basic questions about our household and daily habits. She then begs to talk with me alone in my room. I show her my budget notebook, my documentation of food availability and spending habits, and bill photographs from my phone. She doesn't appear startled or judgmental. She just takes notes and asks clarifying questions about particular incidences and timings. After speaking with me for over an hour, she goes through the house room by room, inspecting the pantry and fridge and taking her own photographs. Finally, she sits down with my parents in the living room, and I am invited to join them. Ms. Donovan speaks plainly and clearly, informing my parents that charging rent to a minor kid is wrong and may constitute neglect of their legal obligations. She says that they must guarantee that I have regular access to food and other essentials, and she will be monitoring the situation through follow-up visits. My parents nod and agree to everything she says, their faces a combination of shame and disdain, but I can tell they understand she's not offering suggestions, she's establishing rules they must obey. Ms. Donovan packs her tablet and folder and proceeds to the door, my parents following her with tight grins. The moment her car pulls away from the curb, her phony friendliness vanishes. Mom rushes directly to the cupboard and removes the lock without saying anything, throwing it away with more force than required. Dad takes out his phone and begins reading through employment postings while sitting at the kitchen table, his mouth tight. Neither of them looks at me or recognizes what has happened, but I can feel their rage permeating every part of the home. Over the following several days, they buy food and put them where I can find them, but they arrange the goods in a planned manner, as if they want me to know they're only doing this because they have to. Mom sighs loudly every time she puts food in the fridge, while Dad mutters under his breath about government overreach and individuals who don't mind their own business. The rent contract disappears off the counter, but no one discusses it, as if pretending it never existed could somehow resolve the matter. I maintain my paperwork up to date nevertheless, taking images of the open pantry and stocked fridge in case things change again. 2 weeks after Ms. Donovan's visit, Dad begins his warehouse work on the night shift loading trucks. He departs for work around 9 p.m. He returns home at 6 a.m., resting the most of the day before waking up to eat dinner and go again. Everything he does reflects his fatigue, from his slower movements to how he falls asleep on the couch before his alarm goes off. The good news is that he's too weary to start conflicts over money or anything else, making the nights more peaceful than they've been in months. Mom appears pleased to have him out of the home at night, and she stops walking on eggshells, waiting for the next argument to begin. I returned home from school one afternoon to find Mom seated at the kitchen table, worksheets spread out in front of her. She notes that her work provides free financial literacy seminars during lunch breaks, and she has decided to attend one. The spreadsheets include basic budgeting, cost tracking, and saving objectives, all of which I learned years ago out of need. But seeing Mom actively engaged with the content and taking notes surprised me because she has never exhibited an interest in money management before. She asks me a few questions about how I track my business's income and spending, and for the first time, we have a normal talk about money without anybody becoming defensive or upset. It doesn't solve everything, but it feels like a modest step towards something better. My daily routine will settle into a regular rhythm during the following month. I get up, go to school, work my afternoon shift at the grocery store, return home to finish schoolwork, do my allotted duties, and go to bed at a fair hour. The consistency means I'm no longer always weary, and my grades are gradually returning to where they were before the stress. Teachers note the change, and a few express their delight to see me performing better. I'm not always calculating how to stretch $25 or wondering if there'll be food when I get home. Life isn't ideal, and my parents still scarcely communicate with me beyond basic domestic tasks, but it's predictable, and I can concentrate on school and job without constantly managing crises. Mrs. Parker texted me on Saturday morning, asking if I wanted to spend the weekend at her house to rest and decompress. She claims her husband is visiting his sister and she would appreciate the companionship. Plus, she is aware that things have been stressful in my place. I ask my parents and expect them to make a huge issue about it, but Dad simply shrugs and says, "All right," and Mom nods without looking up from her budgeting spreadsheet. I pack a suitcase and stroll over to Mrs. Parker's house that afternoon, feeling lighter as I move away from my own front door. The weekend turned out to be just what I needed. 2 days of watching movies, assisting Mrs. Parker with some gardening work and eating meals without any stress in the air. She doesn't ask about my home situation, but she makes it clear that I'm welcome at her house whenever I need a break. Sunday evening, I return home feeling utterly energized and prepared to face whatever comes next. About 2 weeks later, Ms. Donovan arrives for her follow-up visit and sits with all three of us in the living room. She goes over her notes from the initial visit and asks specific questions regarding food access, my academic achievement, and home costs. My parents respond graciously, showing her the open pantry, filled refrigerator, and Mom's budget spreadsheets. Ms. Donovan is happy with the progress, but she reminds everyone that the case remains open for further monitoring, and she plans to check in on a regular basis over the next few months. After she goes, my parents resume their silent displeasure, but they make no changes, apparently knowing that Ms. Donovan was not giving suggestions. I met with Mrs. Carter for lunch one day to discuss my plans for junior and senior year. She cites a dual enrollment program, which allows high school students to take college classes at the community college while both receiving high school and college credit. The program covers tuition and provides subsidies for books and transportation. Mrs. Carter assists me in filling out the application immediately in her office and produces a good reference letter showcasing my work ethic and academic progress. I submit everything before the deadline and try not to get my expectations up too high, but the prospect of getting a head start on college while still in high school seems like just the chance I need. About a week after I submit the application, Mom approaches me in the kitchen and asks if I might lend them money for an unforeseen auto repair. Dad stands behind her, nodding, and they both have the same frantic expression I remember from when Dad first lost his job. I inform them I can draft a formal loan agreement outlining the amount, interest rate, and payback period so that everyone is on the same page. I take out my laptop and begin typing a simple contract while they watch. Their looks morph from optimistic to uneasy, and Dad eventually replies, "Never mind. We'll figure something else out." They walk away, and I keep the blank loan agreement form for future use, knowing that putting everything in paper protects both them and me. The next weekend, I notice the large TV has disappeared from the living room. Mom adds that they sold it to help pay off their credit card debt, and Dad canceled the costly sports package permanently. The living room appears empty without the large screen, and I can tell they both despise having made these modifications. But it's actual progress toward getting their finances in order, even if they plainly despise every step. Dad moans about missing his games, while Mom often emphasizes how little the old TV in their bedroom is in comparison to what they previously had. I don't mention that these are the types of sacrifices I've been making since I was 12, since it would just spark another battle. 2 months after completing my application, I receive an email informing me that I have been accepted into the dual enrollment program and would receive a full scholarship to cover my books and transportation fees. Beginning next September, I'll spend my mornings taking college classes at the community college and my afternoons completing high school prerequisites. The acceptance letter offers details on course choices and orientation dates. I print it out and present it to my parents, thinking they will be proud or at least recognize it as an accomplishment. Dad looks at it and says, "That's good," while Mom nods and explains how it will save them money for education later. Their reactions sting a little since this is a huge event and I worked hard to make it happen, but I'm learning not to look for affirmation from them. A week later, we all sit down at the kitchen table with a written paper that clearly states everything. No rent until I turn 17. My responsibilities include taking out the garbage on Tuesdays and Thursdays, doing my own washing, and assisting with meal preparation 3 evenings each week. Food access implies that the pantry and refrigerator remain unsecured, allowing me to consume whatever is available without seeking permission. My employment income belongs to me, and I am not obliged to contribute to home expenses. Mom reads it again, and Dad moves in his chair, appearing uncomfortable, but he does not object. We all sign at the bottom, and I take a photo with my phone before Mom drives me to school to give Mrs. Carter the original for her files. Mrs. Carter takes it over and approves before storing it in a folder with my name on it. She instructs me to notify her immediately if anything changes or if my parents attempt to amend the conditions without my consent. The next Thursday, we eat supper together at the normal time, with baked chicken and rice cooked by Mom using store-bought ingredients. Dad discusses a situation in the warehouse with a forklift that broke down. Mom describes a tough customer at her retail job who wanted to return an item without a receipt. I tell them about a quiz I performed well on in history class and a new client who wants weekly lawn treatment beginning in the spring. Nobody screams, mentions money, or makes disparaging remarks about my clothes or meals. It's not warm, and we're not laughing or sharing deep thoughts, but we're sitting together, eating a meal, and chatting about ordinary things with no stress in the air. After supper, I assist load the dishwasher as per the arrangement, and then retire to my room to complete my schoolwork. Looking ahead, I sense something I haven't felt in years. Cautious hope for my circumstances. Mrs. Carter checks in regularly, and Ms. Donovan does monthly house visits. I have a clear path to college thanks to the dual enrollment program, which begins next autumn. Even though they still detest the scrutiny, my parents are better at managing their money now that someone is keeping them accountable. I've learned to stand up for myself when required, and that asking for help does not imply weakness or helplessness. Things aren't great with my parents, and they probably never will be, but I'm forging a future that doesn't rely on them being constant or abruptly changing personalities. Given where we started, that seems to be the best end I could hope for. You're still the dumb one. Dad said over steak, while I sent $1,200 per month for 3 years. So I froze the accounts, called my lawyer, evict them. My name is Lowell, and I am 32. I have no degree, no framed paper on the wall, no alumni sticker on my bumper, and no stories about dorm room mayhem or campus nights. With just a GED, a lot of late nights, and a bank account, the individuals who used to humiliate me began calling me family again. For years I told myself that was enough, that success would speak louder than whatever they were saying behind my back. Turns out I was mistaken, or perhaps just naive. It occurred last Friday during dinner in the home I purchased for them. A property with granite countertops, designer furniture, and that dumb wine fridge my mother insisted on. All of it was paid in full under my name but never recognized. We were eating steaks I had picked up on the way, grilled medium rare, just the way Dad likes them, with a bottle of something imported that Mom had underlined in a magazine but conveniently forgot to get. I didn't want to stay long, I simply wanted to show up, keep the peace, check on the repairs they'd been ignoring, and make sure the thermostat hadn't been turned up to loud levels again. Dinner started out good. Tight as normal, but silent. My sister Petra was also there. 29, 2 degrees, still unemployed, and perhaps more condescending than ever. She primarily glanced through her phone while Mom whined about how difficult life is these days, and Dad complained about the cost of groceries, as if he wasn't getting half his fridge delivered on my dime every week. Then something happened. We were halfway through dessert, a store-bought pie I brought because Mom said she didn't have time to bake, when Dad set down his fork and poked it in my direction. You know, he added, raising his voice just enough to attract attention. He might pay the bills around here, but let's not forget he's still the dumb one without a degree. It took me a second to process that. The air became still. Petra snorted into the glass. Mom didn't even blink and sipped her wine as if she were watching a replay. And me? I merely stared at the slice of pie that I was no longer hungry for. I did not say anything. Not at first. I let the silence linger as my head buzzed like a wasp nest. All those years of sacrifice, working 12-hour shifts, teaching myself coding at night, staying on couches while sending them money for theirs, all culminated in a single, crushing moment of shame. And the worst part? They did not even flinch. None of them felt they had done anything wrong. I stood up silently, moved my dish to the sink, rinsed it, and dried my hands. Then I grabbed my keys, said, "Thanks for dinner," and left. It wasn't until I was in my car, motor still turned off, hands on the steering wheel, that it hit me. This was not new. It wasn't a mistake or an insensitive joke. This has been going on for years. Every holiday, every visit, and every text message that said, "Can you help with this bill?" came with no thank you. Everyone makes fun of me for not being educated enough. Every expectation that I'd just keep providing, spending, and turning up because what else was I good at? That night, I sat on the couch in my downtown apartment, the one no one ever asks about, and opened my laptop. I did not anger. I did not cry. I just sat there, motionless and quiet, like a surgeon about to perform the first incision. The first plug I pulled was a tiny one. The automatic grocery orders I had set up with Instacart were no longer there. The second was a Netflix account. Then there were the services I'd been covering under my name, such as water and electricity, as well as the internet, where Dad used to watch his sports every night. I did not cancel them outright. Not yet. But I fixed the end dates and ensured that the following billing cycle was their responsibility. Then I opened the shared cloud account I had set up for Mom, which had all of her images saved up. I was not cruel. I did not delete anything, but I did disable my access, lock it down, and change the recovery information. For once, they would have to figure out their own passwords. Next, I stared at the banking app. My stomach turned. There it was, the automatic transfer I'd been making to help pay down my second mortgage. They never told me they had refinanced. $1,200 every month for the past 3 years. I canceled it with a single click. Still, I wasn't finished. I opened the document that made my skin crawl every time I looked at it. A power of attorney form I signed during Dad's health scare 2 years ago, when he couldn't manage his finances and simply needed some assistance. I'd been handling the taxes, loans, and investments discreetly and competently, never asking for credit. Now I was withdrawing my name from all logins, writing a formal revocation letter, and making it official. As I worked, something unexpected came up. Not rage or despair, but relief. Every time I clicked confirm, it seemed like a weight was lifted, piece by piece. However, I wasn't rushing. No angry emails, no big confrontations, just a steady, deliberate, silent withdrawal, like the tide receding before the storm. I knew they would not notice at first. That was the beauty of it. They were accustomed to the support being unobtrusive, automatic, and effortless. They wouldn't understand what had happened until the cracks appeared. The water turned off in the middle of the shower, the internet went down during the big game, and the mortgage company left a voicemail they couldn't miss. The next morning, Petra texted me, checks for dinner. I suppose you could have at least laughed at Dad's joke. Is this a joke? I didn't respond. I just opened the final file, one they had no idea existed, and checked the numbers. Then I began composing a message. Not for them. To somebody else. And that's when the plan truly began. It was a note for my lawyer, Maura. The same one who helped me start my business when I was just a freelancer with a refurbished laptop and a dream. Maura is a bright woman who does not blink when a client says, "I think I want to quietly dismantle a financial arrangement with my family." She is also thorough. She reminded me of every shared duty, every blind signature I'd given them in confidence, and every legal link that still connected me to people who regarded me as a walking pocketbook. "Are you sure you want to do this now?" she inquired during a late-night Zoom conversation. "You've been cleaning up after them for years." "I'm not cleaning up anymore," I announced. "I'm walking away, but I'm doing it clean." The following week became a checklist of quiet ends. The family phone plan was separated. I created new lines in their names and included a 30-day notice in the fine print of an email they were likely to disregard. The shared insurance coverage removed me. What about my father's spare credit card, which he had been using just in emergencies? Gone. I even marked the auto-renewals on my mother's makeup subscriptions, which she had always thought I was willing to cover. Each work brought a sense of clarity that I had not felt in years. Not really revenge or spite, but rather a deliberate, meticulous reclaiming of boundaries that should never have been violated in the first place. Then came the home. Technically, it was still in my name. I acquired it outright 5 years ago, following my first major software contract. I told them it was a gift, even though I maintained the deed in my LLC for liability reasons. I'd paid the taxes, the maintenance, and the idiotic landscaper whom my father refused to fire even after he destroyed the sprinkler system. But I want it back. I did not want to kick them out. Not yet. But I wanted them to understand it was never fully theirs. that every inch of drywall, carpet, and ceiling fan belonged to me. I could sell it, lease it, bulldoze it, and build a parking lot if I chose. That's when Maura revealed the property audit clause in the LLC agreement, which allowed me to request a comprehensive inspection, reassessment, and even a temporary suspension of residency if necessary. "You really want to go that far?" she inquired. "I want them to stop pretending they built the roof they're sitting under." We scheduled the audit quietly and legally. A letter has been mailed. Certified. It will arrive within 3 days. On the surface, nothing appeared to change. I continued to use one-word responses in the family group chat. I still appreciated the occasional Instagram picture featuring my mother's garden, still fulfilled the part of the calm, trustworthy son, but within, I was counting down. The first crack occurred on day 4. Mom called me at 7:42 a.m. I didn't respond. Her voicemail was lengthy and rambling, something about the sprinklers being turned off mid-cycle, and a man in a suit going about the backyard taking notes. She was simply asking whether I knew anything about it. I did not call back. By the end of the week, Petra had shared this intriguing story on Instagram. Some people forget who was present when they had nothing. Don't worry, we remember. The irony made me giggle in the dark at 2 a.m., while drinking coffee in the apartment they hadn't seen since I moved out. Then came the second call, this one from Dad. He did not leave a voicemail, but instead texted, "We need to talk." Someone from the city was asking inquiries. That was not true. The guy was not from the city. He was a private inspector. I knew because I had hired him. Marcus's name was Marcus, and he was an expert at his work. His report arrived the next morning, a 68-page document detailing every code infraction, undocumented remodeling, and financial discrepancy involving the property. Apparently, Dad had rented out the guest house to one of his poker cronies for money. They hadn't told me. Had not reported it. Just pocketed the money and claimed it as a favor on my property, with my name on the liability line. That's when the gears really started turning. I carefully crafted the next email. Sent it to Maura in a single line. Activate the eviction clause. Quietly. But even so, I was not unkind. I offered them 30 days, which was more than enough time to organize their affairs, move, downsize, and realize that maybe, just maybe, calling me the dumb one at the dinner table wasn't worth losing the roof over their heads. Still, I did not tell them explicitly. Not yet. Instead, I got on with my life. Business meetings, gym workouts, and dinner with pals. I even went to Petra's old campus just for fun. I walked past the buildings she used to brag about. I recalled all the times she deemed me unqualified because I hadn't traversed those same halls. Then, on day 12, I received an email from Mom. The subject line just said, Lowell. The body was short. No hello, no greetings. Just, "We received the notice. I do not comprehend. Why are you doing this?" I stared at it for a time. My fingers hovered above the keyboard. And then I wrote the sentence they didn't expect. "Because you mistook my generosity for stupidity, and I'm not foolish enough to put up with it anymore." I pressed send. The response arrived within an hour. This is not from Mom, but from Dad. I'm not sure what I expected. Perhaps an apology. He reluctantly admitted that he had crossed a line. Instead, there was a wall of deflection. He began with, "This is overreacting," followed by a guilt trip about how family always sticks together. He then switched to what he felt was a trump card. "If we hadn't reared you, you wouldn't have any money to fling around." I read that section twice. Then again. Just to make sure. Raise me? This dad forgot about my high school graduation since he was on a fishing trip. Who encouraged me to get over it when I called crying after being fired from my first job? This individual believed he was entitled to credit for my accomplishments. As if his silence, dismissiveness, and relentless undercutting constituted support. I didn't respond. I forwarded the email to Maura and urged her to direct all future communications through legal means. From that point forward, I stopped playing the obedient son. I was suddenly the legal property owner, a client, and an adult with limits and consequences to enforce them. Things went quiet for a few days after that, strangely silent. Quiet enough to make your skin crawl. I could feel the tension mounting, like a pressure cooker about to explode. I knew my family. They were not the type to go down gracefully. They'd beg, guilt trip, and maybe even threaten. But would they apologize for their actions? That would entail admitting they were wrong. Nothing worried them more than losing the delusion that they were always correct. On day 17, Petra arrived at my office. I'm not sure how she found the address. I had never informed her where I worked, and it was not public. But there she was, in the foyer, speaking to the receptionist as if she owned the place. I froze when I saw her through the glass wall. She seemed different, less haughty and more needy. "Lowell," she remarked as I answered the door. "Can we talk? Just 5 minutes, please." I did not welcome her in. I just stood in the corridor, arms folded, face blank. She sighed and adjusted her weight, as if considering whether to feign a tear. "Look, I get it. They were harsh. Dad was out of line. But this is extreme." "You think this is extreme?" I inquired, keeping my tone low. "Taking back what's mine?" "There are parents," she added, as if that resolved anything. I laughed quickly and sharply. "Funny. You only say are when it's convenient. When I'm footing the bill." She stared at me, and for the first time, I noticed it. Not anger, pity, or fear. Real terror. She understood I wasn't lying. "They don't have anywhere to go," she explained. "You can't just throw them out." "They had 5 years to build a safety net," I told them. "I gave them everything, and they spit on it every chance they had. This isn't vengeance, Petra, it's me choosing peace." She began to fight, but I was done. I turned and returned to my office, leaving her standing in the hallway. My assistant inquired whether I wanted her escorted away. I shake my head. Let her sit with it. Let her explain to Mom and Dad why their golden goose finally stopped laying eggs. On day 20, the fissures were no longer subtle. Dad called from an unknown phone number and left a voicemail. "I'm not asking for much, just time. Just don't do anything drastic. You're better than this." Then a text from Mom. "We're family. This isn't who you are." But it was. Or, more accurately, who I had become. Someone who finally realized that being family did not imply being someone's doormat. That blood was not an excuse for treason disguised as tradition. On day 24, Maura called. "They filed a complaint," she explained. "They're claiming emotional distress, trying to block the eviction, but it won't hold. You've got everything documented." This was years in the making, Lowell. I nodded slowly, despite the fact that she could not see me. "Let them squirm," I replied. "Let them feel what it's like to be uncertain, to not know when the rug might be pulled." It was nasty perhaps, but not nearly as terrible as the years I spent being invisible, except when someone needed a check, a favor, or a last-minute rescue. On day 28, I drove by the house once just to see. The lawn was overgrown. The lights are off. A for rent sign sat uncomfortably in the yard, possibly hoping to buy them some time. But nobody was going to bite. Not while the audit report is flying about. I rolled down the window and sat there silently. The weight of everything has now hit me. This was the house I had provided them. I believed this place would bring us closer. But it wasn't about the house. Or the money. Or even the absence of a degree. It was about respect. They had run out of it. Then, as I was about to drive away, my phone vibrated. Petra sent a new message. The message sat like a weight in my hand. "You might want to come home. Something happened. Something bad." I read it again. Home. That word affected me. Curled my lip and stiffened my jaw. That place had stopped being home. When they made it plain that I'd never be more than a walking ATM with a blank resume. Nevertheless, I couldn't ignore it. Not because I cared what Petra had to say, but because if anything went wrong, I wanted to make sure it wasn't blamed on me. I drove silently, the headlights cutting through the dusk like a knife. My stomach churned during the voyage. Not due to worry or anticipation. A part of me, buried beneath years of obligation and silence, desired a battle. I wanted them to attempt playing the victims one more time so I could finally, completely, and publicly cut the cord. When I pulled up to the house, I sensed something was wrong right away. There were 2 cars in the driveway that I did not recognize. One of them resembled a contractor's van. The other was a silver sedan with the insignia partially hanging off. The porch light was turned off, which was unusual because Mom had usually insisted on leaving it on, just in case company comes by. I got out of my car, and the warm night air felt heavier than it should have. As I approached, I noticed Petra on the front steps, arms wrapped around her knees, appearing little in a way that contradicted her typical position of smug confidence. She stood when she saw me, pushing her hair away from her face, and whispered quietly, "You're not going to believe it." "I'll be the judge of that," I stated bluntly. "Where's Mom and Dad?" She paused. "Inside. Talking to the guy from the bank." I blinked. The bank? She nodded, her eyes wide. Apparently Dad tried to take out another loan against the property before the eviction notice went through. They claimed it was only a bureaucratic delay. He figured he could flip the guest house for a fast profit. And then I felt a chill run down my spine. But he does not own the house. I do. His name is not on the deed. Exactly. She inhaled forcefully. The bank uncovered it before the payments cleared, but there is now a fraud alert on the property. They're sending someone to assess the next steps. He could have just committed mortgage fraud, Nate. I did not speak. Can't really. My mind was already thinking 10 steps ahead. Liabilities, paperwork, lawsuits, and damage control. Where is he now? I inquired. Inside, she said. This time quietly. Yelling. I stepped past her, opening the door without knocking. Inside, it appeared as if a bomb had gone off, not physically but emotionally. Papers were strewn on the dining table, cabinets were left open, and cups were half filled on the counters. Dad stood in the middle of it all, red-faced and swinging his arms, arguing with a man in a navy blazer who held a folder and a clipboard. You don't get it, Dad snapped. This whole thing is just a misunderstanding. My son owns the place, it's all family. There was no fraud. The man did not flinch. Sir, you filed legal documentation declaring ownership of a property that, according to county records, is wholly owned by Lowell Ellis and is described as a business entity. You provided falsified documentation. I didn't forget anything, Dad snapped. I just made some copies, adjusted some dates. That's not the same. I cleared my throat loudly enough to make both of them pause. Dad turned, his face devoid of color. Lowell, he muttered, his voice lowering like a stone. Good, you can explain. Tell him it's fine. We're family. I stared at him, at the father who raised me with backhanded praises and repeated reminders that I was never intelligent enough to succeed. At the man who had just risked jail time by using my name to extend his fantasy life based on my generosity. No, I said quietly. I won't be explaining anything. You're on your own. The man in the blazer gave me a respectful nod. Mr. Ellis, I assume you're aware of the attempted second mortgage application? Just found out, I said. And I'll be consulting my attorney immediately. If there's any liability being considered here, I'll need a formal report for my records. I can get you a copy, he replied, turning open his folder. It's not pretty. Dad stepped forward, panic seeping through his tough guy persona. Come on, Lowell. Don't do this. You know I didn't mean any harm, I just needed time. Time? I repeated. Like the years I gave you while you ridiculed me? Like the dinners where you laughed about my lack of a degree while spending the money I earned? That kind of time? Mother arrived in the corridor behind him. Arms crossed and face inscrutable. She didn't say anything or defend herself. She simply watched. Petra came in a bit later, hesitating awkwardly in the entryway. For once she had nothing sarcastic to contribute. No smug grin. There's no half-joke to relieve the tension. I strolled into the kitchen, admiring the granite countertops and the glass backsplash Mom had chosen from a magazine I bought for. I opened the refrigerator, which was empty save for a bottle of wine and a takeaway carton. There was no thank you message, no reminder that this was my place. I came back to them and replied. I will give you till the end of the week, after which the locks will change. If you're still here, I'll have the sheriff lead you out. Oh, and any legal ramifications from your little loan prank are your own. Dad opened his mouth, but I raised my hand. We're done here. I walked out before they could say anything else, closed the door behind me, and got into my car. I sat for a minute, watching the front lights turn on. Perhaps Mom had finally moved. Maybe Petra flipped a switch on the way out. Then my phone vibrated again. This time, there was a voicemail. Not from Petra or Mom, but from someone I had not heard from in years. And as I listened to it, I knew the family drama wasn't over yet. It was my Uncle Virgil. I hadn't spoken to him in nearly 10 years, not since the last family reunion, when he caught me behind the grill with a paper plate in hand and murmured, "You're not like the rest of them. You know that, right?" He was Dad's older brother and the family's black sheep long before I became one. A mechanic who did not attend college, divorced twice, and lived in a camper by the lake. But somehow he'd always made more sense to me than anyone else with our surname. His message was quiet, harsh, and straightforward. Hey Nate. I heard what's going on from Petra, and I know they've done you wrong. I warned you years ago that they only love what you give them, not who you are. If you need assistance with the mess, Or if you simply want to relax on a dock with a beer and say nothing, you have a spot here. They don't get to define you longer. Let them drown in what they created. I stared at the screen for a long time after the message was over. It was not the words. It was the simplicity, the lack of guilt, and the serene acceptance. I had no idea how much I needed that until I heard it from someone who wasn't asking for anything. The final week was like a storm surge. Dad tried everything: emails, phone calls, even stopping by my place with a cooler full of steaks and a sheepish grin, as if we could somehow cook the tension away. I did not answer the door. I didn't respond. I sent every communication directly to Maura. Mom's tone also changed. Her texts progressed from confusion to guilt, then desperation. "You're scaring us. This isn't like you. We're losing everything." But the irony is that it had always been mine. They were only now recognizing this. By Friday afternoon, the movers I hired, not theirs, had arrived at the house. I ensured they were professional, careful, and considerate. I didn't want their belongings harmed. I simply wanted them gone. I stood in the driveway while the boxes were loaded into the vehicle. Dad sat silently on the porch, arms resting on his knees, as if he'd just learned the game was ended and he'd been betting with chips he never owned. Mom was inside, arguing with the lead mover about what constitutes essentials. Petra didn't appear. She stopped responding altogether after attempting to borrow $5,000, just until I figure things out. By 3 p.m., the house was completely vacant. The locks were changed. The title was being transferred to a rental firm that I trusted. I had already interviewed 3 tenants. One was a single mother with a daughter who wanted to grow tomatoes in her backyard. I agreed right away. As the movers drove away, Dad finally rose up and approached me. "Lowell," he muttered, his voice cracking for the first time in perhaps forever. "Can I just ask you one thing?" I did not respond, just looked at him. He paused. "Why'd you wait so long to cut us off?" I let the silence continue. Then I said, "Because I believed you might change. I hoped that if I offered enough, you'd view me as a son, not a resource. Not the dumb one. Just me." He looked away. "You were wrong," he stated gently. "I know," I said. "But not anymore." I got into my car and drove away without looking back. No spectacular exits or parting shots, just tranquility. The following several months were the quietest in my life. No calls, no chaos, no urgent needs for assistance disguised as family bonding. The new occupants have moved in. I stopped checking the family group chat. No one had posted in it since the locks were changed. The silence seemed unusual at first, but it grew on me. A few weeks later, on a Saturday morning, I traveled to the lake. Uncle Virgil greeted me at the pier with 2 drinks, a smirk, and a nod as if no time had passed. We sat on the worn seat and watched the ripples spread across the water. "You all right?" he inquired, popping open his can. I nodded. I am now. And for the first time in years, I was not lying. Dad gave my sister's boyfriend 30% of our $12 million business. He wrecked it in 8 months and vanished with $200,000. So I rebuilt it and had the FBI chase him. I, a 33-year-old male, have been involved in my family's commercial fishing business since I was a teenager. My grandpa began it, my father expanded it, and I was meant to be the next in line, until I wasn't. Our family has run a commercial fishing operation for almost 50 years. My grandfather began with a single boat and expanded it into a fleet of 8 vessels that supply seafood restaurants in 3 states. I virtually grew up abroad on those vessels. I recall being 8 years old and waking up at 4 a.m. I went to the docks with my father and watched the guys prepare the boats as the sun rose. By the time I was 12, I knew every type of fish we caught and how much they were worth per pound. By the age of 16, I was helping to handle the crew schedules throughout the summer. And by 22, while my undergraduate friends were interning at desk jobs, I was already managing our key customer relationships while completing my business degree. I'm 6 feet 2 inches tall, spend most mornings at the gym, and have always been the guy my father, a 59-year-old male, relied on when things went wrong. Last year, when one of our boats had an engine failure 50 miles offshore, I organized the rescue operation, got a replacement part helicopter out, and saved a $200,000 catch from spoiling. That is the type of problem-solving approach I brought to the table every day. My sister Amanda, a 28-year-old female, never showed any interest in the company. While I was learning the ropes and busting my ass on the boats, she was continually changing majors in college and finding herself. First it was psychology, then communications, and then marketing. I was the one who'd been there, who knew every client by name, who could tell you the profit margins on every species we caught, and who'd worked personally with every captain in our fleet. She eventually settled on graphic design, but she hasn't done much with the degree. I've dated on and off over the years, but nothing serious, because the business has always been my main commitment. My last girlfriend ended things because she said I was married to the job, which may be true, but when you've poured your heart and soul into something your entire life, it becomes a part of you. So, when Dad called a family meeting 2 years ago, I assumed he was finally ready to discuss succession planning. I'd been bringing it up subtly for months, mentioning how I had ideas for expanding our distribution network and modernizing some of our processes without losing the personal touch that made us unique. We all met in my parents' dining room, which was the same house where I grew up, and the walls were covered in fishing images and mounted catches. Mom, a 57-year-old woman, had prepared her renowned clam chowder, and although it was a Tuesday night, it felt like a special event. Dad cleared his throat like he often does before speaking anything significant. "I've decided to take a step back from daily operations," he told reporters. Fair enough, I thought. He'd worked hard his entire life, building on what his father had started, and deserved to enjoy his latter years. He was approaching 60 and still worked 12-hour days on occasion. I sat up straighter, eager to learn about my new responsibilities, but suddenly, he dropped a grenade into my lap. "And I'm putting Logan in charge as the new operations manager." Logan, my sister's 18-month boyfriend, is a 33-year-old entrepreneur who has never worked for more than a year. The guy wore loafers to our boat dock for goodness sake, and the first time he came to the marina, he questioned if the diesel fuel we use in the boats was environmentally friendly. I broke out laughing. I looked at my sister who was grinning and gripping Logan's hand, and Logan sat there with a smug smirk, nodding as if he had known all along. "Logan has fresh ideas," my father said, oblivious to my surprise. "He has an MBA, and we need someone with a different perspective." Logan's MBA was an online certificate program that cost $2,000 and required 6 weeks to finish. Nevertheless, at the time, I was too startled to ask any questions. "Dad," I finally said, "Logan doesn't know anything about commercial fishing." "That's exactly why we need him," Dad said, as if it were the most rational thing in the world. "He's not bound by industry conventions. He can see the opportunities that we are passing up." I looked at my mother, hoping for an ally. But she only gave me that look she always gives when she doesn't want to contradict Dad in public. Amanda was gazing at me as if I had insulted her firstborn child, and I tried not to show how devastated I was. I didn't want to come across as the envious son, so I nodded and congratulated Logan, who had this smug little grin that made me want to throw him overboard. After supper, I approached my father in his study, the same place where he taught me how to tie fishing knots as a child. "Don't you think someone who understands the business should be in charge?" I inquired, attempting to keep my voice level. "Do you mean yourself?" he inquired, raising an eyebrow. "Dad, I've been operating half the operation for years. I know our customers, our fleet, and our personnel. I have been in charge of the northeastern accounts, which account for 40% of our revenue. That's the precise issue, Ethan. You are too entrenched in the old methods. Logan has a vision of modernization." "What vision? He has never even worked in this industry." Dad placed his hand on my shoulder and said, "Son, fresh eyes can see things we can't. Give him the chance. He has some nice ideas for increasing our web visibility." "Dad, what is your online presence?" "Our business is based on relationships. Our clients buy from us because they trust us, and we've proven ourselves dependable for decades. That does not originate from a website or social media." "Ethan, the world is changing. We have to change it." I should have argued harder and explained why this was such a bad idea, but I respected my father too much. We lost Fleming's Seafood, a client we'd had for 25 years, and then Coastal Cuisine, another major account. Captain Frank, who'd been with us since I was in diapers, quit, along with 2 other veteran captains. I thought he saw something in Logan that I didn't, but that was a big mistake. 6 months later, our once rock-solid business was rapidly sinking. I was still handling our East Coast clients, who thankfully, were still profitable. Every morning, I'd get up at 4:30, go to the gym for an hour, and arrive at the docks by 6:30, to ensure our day boats left on time. Then I'd head to the office to handle calls, manage shipments, and solve problems. Basically, doing everything I'd always done, but now with the added challenge of working around Logan's improvements. One of those improvements was a new routing system that made no sense if you knew anything about coastal navigation or fuel efficiency. Another was a software package that cost $50,000 and was supposed to streamline operations, but it mostly just complicated things and crashed frequently. Then there was the redesigned logo and website that cost $30,000 and generated exactly zero new business. But every time I walked into headquarters, the most noticeable change was the atmosphere, which was like a funeral home, with people looking unhappy and tense, as if they were waiting for the axe to fall. Logan sacked 2 of our long-term employees and replaced them with his cronies, who spent more time on their phones than working. Gus, our fleet maintenance manager for over 20 years, pulled me aside after I finished inventory one day. Gus is the kind of guy who can fix anything with an engine, the type who's worth his weight in gold in our business. His hands are permanently stained with engine grease, and he has a perpetual sunburn from years on the water. "Ethan, this place is going to hell," he mumbled, looking over his shoulder to ensure no one heard. Logan doesn't know his ass from a hole in the ground. He reorganized the routes, so we're using more fuel. He alienated half of the dock workers and hired 3 of his college mates who knew nothing about commercial fishing. "What is my father saying about all of this?" I inquired, already anticipating the answer. Gus merely shook his head. "Your father is scarcely present anymore." Logan assures him that everything is okay and shows him some charts with sophisticated graphics, which your father thoroughly enjoys. "What about the captains that have left?" Dad must have inquired about it. Logan informed him that they were opposed to change and that we needed younger commanders nonetheless. "If you believe in dinosaurs, call them such." Your father appeared to believe that, despite the fact that those dinosaurs are the reason this company has withstood 5 decades of hurricanes, recessions, and everything else. I was trying to keep my cool, but inside I was boiling. I'd spent my entire adult life helping to establish this firm, understanding every facet of it, earning the respect of our crews and clients, and now this guy was driving it into the ground, and my father was allowing it to happen. That afternoon I tried phoning Fleming Seafood, trying to find out why they'd truly left us. The owner, Leo Fleming, had always been honest with me. We'd eaten dinner at each other's homes, and I'd seen his children grow up. "Ethan," he remarked when he heard my voice. "Been a while." "Yeah, Leo, I heard you guys aren't buying from us anymore." There was a pause. "Look, I didn't want to cause a fuss, but that new man, Logan, he's a problem. First, he increased our pricing without notice. Then he botched up 3 consecutive shipments. When I contacted to complain, he simply said, 'If you don't like it, find another supplier.'" "He's what?" I felt my blood pressure rise. "Yeah. You mentioned that you were moving up market and would no longer be able to cater to price-sensitive clientele. Ethan, we have been conducting business for 25 years. Your granddad would personally bring our orders." It felt like a slap to the face. I apologized profusely, but the damage had been done. Leo had signed a contract with another provider. I called 3 additional former clients and heard similar stories. Logan was systematically breaking relationships that had taken decades to create. That night, I couldn't sleep because I kept thinking about my grandfather. How he started this firm from scratch. How delighted he was when my father took over and developed it, and how proud they both were when I joined. And now, an arrogant blowhard who knew nothing about our profession was taking it all down in a couple of months. I felt it was time to really talk to my father. After a few restless nights, I decided to approach my father. We've always had a complex relationship. He's the type that displays affection by teaching you how to tie knots or fix an engine rather than saying, "I love you." But I knew he cared about my grandfather's legacy. On a Sunday I discovered him alone at the main office, going through documents, most likely trying to make sense of Logan's mess. When I discussed the business issues, his body language changed, jaw tight, shoulders squared, as if he were backed into a corner. "Dad, we need to talk about what's happening with the company." "Everything is okay, Ethan. There is always an adjustment period with new management." "It isn't fine, Dad. In the past 6 months we have lost 5 large clients. 3 of our top captains have resigned. Logan's additional routes have driven up our gasoline expenses dramatically." "Logan is innovating," he observed plainly. "Change is hard for people." "Dad, innovation is great, but he's losing clients we've had for decades. Our fuel expenses have increased by 30% as a result of Logan's new routing method, which makes no sense if you know anything about coastal travel." Dad exhaled that heavy sigh I'd heard my entire life. "Every new boss makes mistakes, Ethan. I made a lot of money when I took over for your grandfather. This is not about typical learning curves, Dad. The business is losing money. Captain Frank stated. Logan barely knows bow from stern, and he's making decisions about fleet operations. That was when my father's expression tightened. So that's it. You're jealous because I didn't put you in control. That hit me like a blow in the stomach. It's not about me, Dad. It's about conserving what Grandpa built, what you built, and what I've helped build over the past decade. You don't believe I know what's best for the company? I have been running it since before you were born. So why can't you see what Logan is doing? Have you spoken with any of our clients? Have you asked them why they are leaving? Have you spoken with the captains about why they're leaving? Dad shifted papers on his desk. Logan has addressed all of that. The clients who left were overly demanding and insufficiently profitable. The captains were not adapting to the new systems. Do you believe that, Dad? I spoke to Leo Fleming yesterday. Logan informed him that we were moving up market and could no longer cater to price-sensitive clientele. Leo has been with us for 25 years. Grandpa would personally deliver fish to him. Ethan, times change. Not every former client fits into our new business strategy. What is the new business model? Losing money, losing loyal customers, or driving away experienced employees. I was straining to keep my voice quiet. Dad stood up with a flushed face. That is enough. I am still the owner of this company, and I make the decisions. Logan is pulling us into the contemporary day, whether we like it or not. Logan only needed time. The clients who left were too demanding, and the captains who quit were opposed to essential adjustments. But he wasn't listening to me. He rejected every worry and made excuses for every problem. My father had always been a clever businessman with good instincts, so how could he not understand what was going on? I left feeling as if I had taken crazy pills. Captain Frank, who had been with our company for over 30 years, contacted me that night. He taught me how to navigate, read the weather, and find fish where others had failed. He was as much a part of our business as the boats themselves. Ethan, I have something I couldn't tell you while I was still working there. Logan may be skimming money. The books do not add up. And now he's driving a beautiful new Audi and took Amanda to the Bahamas last month. My blood ran cold. This wasn't simply stupidity. It could be fraud. But who would believe me if I mentioned it? I'd look like the disgruntled son who was passed up. Do you have some proof, Frank? Nothing specific, although I noticed some paperwork on his desk once. Invoices from a company I hadn't heard of. When I questioned about it, he became really defensive and stated it was none of my concern. That company was receiving $5,000 per month for consultancy services. Have you seen anyone from this company at our offices? Is there any indication they were doing something for that money? Nope. Never saw anyone. I have never heard of any consulting being done. But here's the kicker. I checked up on the company later. It is registered to Logan's brother-in-law from his first marriage. Logan wasn't just incompetent. He was intentionally stealing from us, my family, and the business my grandfather and father had created over a half-century. But I knew that coming to my father with suspicions wouldn't be enough. I needed proof, and I wanted to figure out how severe the harm was before it was too late. I thought maybe my sister would listen to reason, so I invited her to lunch. A huge mistake. We met at a sushi restaurant near her apartment, and Amanda arrived 15 minutes late, looking upset that I had interrupted her day. She had always been the baby of the family, the one everyone made excuses for. So, what is this about? She asked, not even bothering with, hello. I have a meeting at 2. It's about business, Amanda. Things are not going well. She rolled her eyes. Here we go again. You have never given Logan a chance. You've been undermining him since day one because you believe you deserve to lead the company. I tried to remain cool. It is not about who deserves what. It all comes down to the company's health. Have you looked at the numbers recently? We have lost 3 significant clients. Our top captains have quit, and there are major financial concerns. Her face turned crimson. What is that supposed to mean? Logan, where did you acquire the money for that Audi and your trip to the Bahamas? His last work was with a failed startup that did not even pay him his final salary. She sprang up so quickly that her chair tumbled backward. How dare you? Logan received a loan for the car and paid for the vacation with credit card points. You're just making up stories because you can't bear the fact that Dad believes him more than you. People in the restaurant were gazing now, and I kept my voice quiet. Amanda, I am not attempting to attack you or Logan. I'm afraid about the business, Dad's legacy, and the employees that rely on us for a living. Oh please. You are such a martyr. Always act as if you're the only one who cares about the family. Logan is taking the corporation into the 21st century, and you can't take it because it means you're not as important as you believed. That stung, but I pushed on. Has Logan addressed why our profits have dropped 40% since he took over? Or why did we lose the coastal cuisine account, which contributed 15% of our annual revenue? Those old clients were holding us back. Logan is focusing on higher-end restaurants that pay greater rates, but that isn't happening. We're not gaining those higher-end clients, and we're losing the ones we've had for years. She grabbed her purse and got up. I am not listening to this anymore. You're just jealous and spiteful because Dad sees something wonderful in Logan but not in you. She stormed out of the restaurant, leaving me with 2 unopened dinners and a bad sensation in my stomach. I'd never seen my sister like that before. She'd always been the family's peacemaker, able to see both sides. But now she was entirely blind to Logan. Later that night she sent me this text. Stay away from the business, and especially from me and Logan. You are toxic, and Dad agrees with me. That's when I realized I was completely alone in this fight. I spent the following few days gathering information, speaking with more former employees, clients who'd left us, and even some of our suppliers. The image that emerged was worse than I thought. Logan had alienated not only our clients, but also our suppliers. He'd been late on payments, attempted to renegotiate long-standing agreements, and even threatened to move his business elsewhere if they didn't cut their costs. Not comprehending that in our specialized field, there were not always alternatives. Dave, one of our boat mechanics, informed me that Logan had cut corners on maintenance to save money. He advised us to extend the intervals between oil changes to ensure that the parts last longer. That's quite unsafe for a commercial vessel. You understand that better than anyone, Ethan. I knew. I'd been on a boat once when the engine failed 100 miles offshore, and we were fortunate that the Coast Guard arrived before a storm hit. Cutting costs on maintenance wasn't just bad business, it could cost lives. But the more I discovered, the more I felt stuck. My father refused to listen, my sister had turned against me, and Logan was ruthlessly destroying everything my family had created. I realized I only had one option left. Face Logan directly. I messaged Logan and asked him to meet me at a cafe near the marina. He agreed, probably thinking he could smooth things over with his fake charm. I spent the days before gathering information, talking to former employees, reviewing what financial documents I still had access to, speaking with clients who'd left. I came armed with facts rather than just suspicions. Logan arrived 20 minutes late, wearing fancy sunglasses and a continuous sneer. Ethan, what's going on, brother? He tried to give me one of those bro hugs. I remained seated. Let's cut the nonsense, Logan. I understand what you're doing to the business. His smile lost a few watts. Look, I understand. Change is difficult. Your father warned me that you would have problems adjusting to the new course. New direction? I laughed. Is that what we call losing 40% of our customers, or having 3 captains go who have been with us for almost 15 years? Or perhaps the new direction is the $43,000 that vanished from the maintenance budget shortly before you purchased your Audi. The smirk faded altogether. You don't know what you're talking about. I grew up in the business, Logan. I understand exactly what I'm talking about. I understand that we are running at a loss for the first time in 30 years. I know you hired your college classmate as our new accountant, despite his lack of experience in commercial fishing operations, and I know my father gave you almost 30% of the firm without notifying me. Logan's reply validated the last bit, which was a hunch based on what Captain Frank remarked. Your dad recognizes talent when he sees it, Logan remarked with a smile. Maybe if you weren't so stuck in the old ways, he would have chosen you instead. This business was built on those old ways. Relationships, trust, expertise. Things you know nothing about. Logan's face clouded. Look, Ethan, I understand you're upset, but the business is changing and evolving. Your father sees it, even if you don't. And let me be clear, this is no longer just your father's firm. It's also half mine now, so unless you want to cause a big family conflict that will break your father's heart, I recommend that you back off and let me do my job. I wanted to smack his smug face, but instead I stood there, towering above him. It's not over, Logan. My grandfather and father established this firm through hard work and ethics. I refuse to let you trash it with your stupidity and greed. He yelled out to me as I went away. Your dad has already chosen sides, Ethan. Don't make things worse for yourself. Logan had practically revealed that my father had given him a share in the business, my family's firm, in which I'd worked my entire life, and he'd done it without telling me. I spent the journey home repeating the discussion in my thoughts. It felt like the ultimate betrayal, not just from my father, but from the entire family. They pushed me aside for a smooth-talking scam artist who was robbing the corporation blind. When I arrived home, I punched my heavy bag for an hour until my knuckles were raw before taking a cold shower and trying to think properly. I had two choices: continue waging a lost battle to salvage a firm that the owners, my own family, appeared determined to destroy, or walk away, focus on my own future, and let them deal with the repercussions of their actions. The fighter in me wanted to stay and fight it out, but reality realized that without my father's backing and my sister's understanding, I was just bashing my head against a wall. I was determined to make one final try to preserve the company. I would gather concrete evidence of Logan's mismanagement and possibly fraud. Evidence so compelling that even my father couldn't ignore. I spent the next week getting my ducks in a row. I talked to Darren, an old family friend who is an accountant and has done work for our business over the years. He helped me gain access to the company's financial records, which my father had never officially locked me out of. What we discovered made me sick to my stomach. Logan had taken out $120,000 in business development loans with no clear use for the funds, hired 4 friends in made-up positions with salaries totaling more than $300,000, rerouted our fleet in ways that increased fuel costs by 42%, lost 5 of our 8 largest clients, put the company credit card in his name, and racked up $67,000 in charges at restaurants, electronics stores, and luxury hotels in just 8 months. Logan's uncle, who happened to be a corporate lawyer, had put out the papers, and my father had signed over 30% ownership to Logan, with the option for Logan to buy the other 30% at an absurdly low valuation within 3 years. As we studied the paperwork, Darren's expression was bleak. "This is horrible, Ethan. Really terrible. If things continue this way, the company will go bankrupt within a year. Is there anything illegal here? Is there anything we might utilize to void the contract?" Darren flagged out multiple suspicious transactions. These payments to Atlantic Consulting Group, that company does not appear to exist except on paper. It is registered to a UPS shop address. And the quantities for these equipment purchases appear to be inflated, and there is no proof that the equipment has arrived at your site. So, he is embezzling? It appears that way, but proving it legally would necessitate a forensic audit and most likely a lawsuit. It would turn ugly. I printed everything off and went to see my father at home. I found him in his workshop where he often goes to think, working on a scale model of our first fishing boat, the one my grandpa used to start the business. "Dad, we need to talk about Logan." He looked up from the model, his face already set in that defiant attitude I recognize all too well. "Ethan, I thought we settled this." "You need to see these documents," I replied, arranging them on his workbench. "Logan is draining the company dry. He is funneling money to himself and his buddies. He damaged client connections that had been built over decades." At first my father tried to dismiss everything. "These are only growing pains. There are bumps in the road with each leadership transition. Growing pains do not cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, Dad. Consider this. Payments to a phony consultancy firm controlled by Logan's brother-in-law. Inflated equipment purchases for products that never arrived. Personal expenses were charged on the company card." As I showed him document after document, spreadsheet after spreadsheet, his defenses began to shatter. When I showed him charges from a luxury resort in the Bahamas on the corporate card, he finally went mute. After a long moment he gazed up at me through exhausted eyes. "Ethan, what do you want me to do?" "I signed a contract." I gave him my word. "Your word to a con artist doesn't mean anything, Father. We need to speak with a lawyer to determine whether we can cancel the contract due to fraud." He shakes his head. "That would break the family apart. Your sister is in love with him. They are talking about getting married." "So you'd rather have Logan wreck everything you and Grandpa built? All I've done for my entire life?" My father glanced aside. "I need time to think. This is a lot to process." I left the documents with him, hoping they would finally open his eyes, but as I drove away, I got the horrible feeling that it was too late. The damage might already be too great to repair. The next day my father called and asked me to come to the office. When I arrived I was surprised to see Logan sitting with him, along with my sister. "Ethan," my father began, his tone unusually serious. "I've discussed your concerns with Logan, and he's explained everything to my satisfaction." Logan sat there again, arrogant, as my sister glared at me. "Explain what?" I asked. my anger rising. How is he embezzling money? How is he driving away our best clients? Those are serious accusations, Logan replied, his voice calm but threatening. Accusations that could be considered defamation if you started spreading them around. My dad raised his hand. Nobody is accusing anyone of anything. Logan has provided an explanation for all of the unexpected financial decisions. The consulting costs were for market research. The equipment purchases were transferred to a different supplier that provided higher quality. And do you believe that? Have you asked to see the market research? Did you check to see if the new equipment arrived? That's enough, Ethan, my sister said. Logan has been working his ass off to modernize this dinosaur of a company, and all you've done is try to undermine him at every turn. I looked at each of them in turn, my father avoiding my gaze, my sister defensive and angry, Logan jubilant, and I realized I'd lost not only the battle, but the entire war. I'm done, I murmured gently. You made your decision. I hope things work out for you. I walked out of the office, out of the business, out of that chapter of my life. It was the most difficult thing I'd ever done, walking away from all I'd spent my life constructing. However, sometimes the best way to keep your sanity is to let go. I did what any self-respecting man would do. I moved on and focused on developing my own life. I accepted a job with Harborside Seafood, one of our previous competitors, and within 6 months, I was the operations director, bringing with me numerous of our old clientele. While I would have preferred to have entirely forgotten about my family's business, I couldn't help but keep track of Gus, who still worked there and provided me with periodic updates. Logan acquired another fancy car, my sister began posting images of expensive jewelry, and my father became increasingly isolated, spending the most of his time alone on his little personal fishing boat. Logan's mismanagement had left the corporation with no reserves and piles of debt, whereas a well-run operation could have withstood the storm. 14 months after I moved away, my phone rang at 11 p.m. It was my sister, weeping so hard that I couldn't understand her. Ethan, please, Ethan. When she calmed down enough to speak, she informed me that the company had gone bankrupt. The bank had seized 4 of the boats. The remaining crews had not been paid in 3 weeks, and my father had suffered a small heart attack as a result of the stress. Where is Logan? I inquired, already knowing the response. More sobbing. He is gone. He emptied our joint account and disappeared. He left me a note explaining that the business failed because Dad wouldn't allow him to completely realize his goal. I nearly chuckled at the foolishness of it. So, now you want my help? Please, Ethan. Dad's heart. The doctors advise he should avoid stress, but the bank is threatening to seize the house since he used it as collateral for a loan Logan persuaded him to obtain. We do not know what to do. Part of me wanted to say, I told you so. One of me wanted to hang up and let them deal with the mess they'd made when they shoved me aside. But another part of me, the one that remembered fishing with my father when I was 8, the part that still loved my sister despite everything, couldn't do it. I'll come by tomorrow to look at the paperwork, I said. I'm not making any promises. The next day, I walked into my childhood home to find my dad, aged 10, sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by overdue notices and legal documents, and my sister couldn't even look me in the eye. The house was a mess, with packing boxes everywhere, and they were preparing to move out. I'm sorry, son, my father murmured sadly. You were right about everything. Logan had fled to Mexico with over $200,000 in stolen funds. He had forged my father's signature on several documents, which may have helped us legally, but the business was still in ruins. He had maxed out the company credit cards, emptied the business accounts, and even taken out loans using company assets as collateral. My sister appeared horrified. I really thought he loved me, she remarked with a hollow voice. I defended him against everyone, and he was just using me to get to the business. I wanted to respond, no kidding, but seeing her so broken, I couldn't bring myself to twist the knife. Instead, I began making calls. I reached out to my contacts in the industry, contacted Darren for legal advice, called the clients I hadn't brought to Harborside to see if they'd be willing to return under new management, and even called Captain Frank, who was now working for another fishing operation, for advice. The destruction was considerable. Logan had not only ruined the company's finances, but also its reputation in the industry. Suppliers had been stiffed, clients had received subpar products, and the fleet had been neglected to the point that 2 of the boats were no longer seaworthy. But I resolved to give it one more shot, not for my father or sister, who had violated my trust, but for my grandfather, for the legacy he had built, and for the employees who had been loyal to us for years. It took 6 months of 80-hour weeks, legal battles, refinancing, and restoring trust, but we were able to salvage 2 of the boats and keep the business running, albeit in a much smaller capacity. My sister returned to school to complete her business degree, and as we worked together, my father gradually regained his health and pride. One night, as we were going over the office books, which showed an actual profit for the first time since Logan took over, my father looked up at me with tears in his eyes. "I should have trusted you, Ethan. You, like your grandfather, were always at the core of this firm." I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. The lesson was learned the hard way. Sometimes I worry about Logan, probably sipping drinks on a beach someplace with some other lady he's conning. But then I look at what we've rebuilt. Something strong, honest and genuine, built on hard work and trust. 2 months ago, we received a call from the FBI, who informed us that Logan had previously committed similar scams on other firms. They had been tracking him for years, and our case provided them with enough evidence to issue an international warrant. They've blocked assets in 3 countries, and there are allegations that he's been spotted in Cancun. He won't be living the high life for much longer. As for me, I'm now the official owner and CEO of what we've renamed Founding Father Fishing, in honor of my grandfather. Dad signed over his remaining share to me, keeping only 10% for himself as a consultant. He's finally enjoying semi-retirement, going out on the boats when he feels like it, but relying on me to run the day-to-day operations. My sister works in accounting, where I can keep an eye on her, and she's proving herself every day. The Logan calamity humbled her in ways that nothing else could have. Last week she discovered a billing error that saved us $155,000. It's a start. We're down to 3 boats instead of 8, but they're all well-maintained and running efficiently. I rehired Captain Frank and Gus, giving them both ownership stakes so they wouldn't be tempted to leave again. Some of our old clients have returned, and we're gradually rebuilding our reputation in the industry. Every morning, I still go to the gym at 5 a.m., I still work until sundown, and I still personally inspect every boat before it leaves the harbor. Some may call it compulsive, but I call it caring about what you build. Last month I took our newest boat out for a 14-hour voyage in heavy seas, which resulted in a record haul. Nothing surpasses the sensation of returning to port with a full hold, knowing you've defeated whatever the ocean threw at you. Dad occasionally looks at me with a mix of pride and remorse, and I know he's still beating himself up about Logan and how he nearly lost everything our family had created. He attempted to apologize again one night after having had a very nice day. "Son, I cut him off. It's finished, Dad. Water under the bridge. We're moving forward now." He nodded, realizing that some things did not need to be expressed. Logan tried to destroy us, but instead of destroying us, he forced us to strip everything down and rebuild from the ground up, and now we're leaner, smarter, and more hungry than ever. The business is smaller, but it's stronger, and no one is going to take it away from me again. I haven't had a holiday in 2 years, and I haven't been in a significant relationship in even longer. But as I stand on the pier at daybreak, watching our boats leave for sea, my boats, my crews, my family legacy, I know it's all been worthwhile. That's the thing with family businesses. They're about more than simply making money. They're about leaving a legacy, feeling proud, and creating something that will last. Logan saw our business as something to exploit, to milk for quick cash, and he never understood that what makes a family business unique is the family part. Generations of knowledge, pride in doing things right, and a sense of responsibility to those who came before you, and those who will come after. So, if you're reading this and dealing with your own Logan issue, my advice is simple. Fight hard for what counts, and if you fail, be ready to walk away and start over. Sometimes that's the only way to truly save what's vital. The business may be smaller now, but it is still mine, and no one will take it away from me. My family demanded $160,000 for my brother's crypto scam, then dumped my kid like trash. Now they're begging as their house falls apart. Okay, this is definitely going to sound crazy, but I need to get it out somewhere because my mind is just spinning on it, and I'm not sure what's normal anymore, whether this is just my family, or whether other people suffer with it as well. So, my name is Caleb, and I'm 29 years old. My family is quite large. Always has been. Italian Americans are boisterous and always have the last say. Nobody in my family ever lets anything go. My parents, Mark and Karen, have always been enamored with my brother Brandon. For real. He's 31 years old, still lives at home, and has always had a plan that never materialized. I love him. He's my brother. But I'm not sure whether I like him half the time. If you know, then you know. So I am not in the country right now. Nothing glamorous. Just needed a refresh. And the money was great. But I had my 6-year-old son, Eli, who was scheduled to stay with my parents for a few months because his school year was coming to an end, and it would be easier than relocating him in the middle. I thought everything was good. Every day I communicated with him through video calls, money transfers, and other means. My parents made it sound like they were enjoying it, as if he was the pleasure of the house and everything. So here's where things get weird. I give the regular money for groceries and Eli, and my dad texts me something like, "Call me when you get a sec. We need to talk about Brandon." I'm wondering, what now? Did he crash another car or something? When I call, they are both on speaker and are just getting off. Not yelling but passive-aggressive like, "Your brother's in a tough spot, and family means helping each other and it's time you step up." I'm already bracing for it. So they just drop it. Brandon owes a lot. They will not tell me right away, and they want me to pay for it. I'm like, what? How much? And they evade. Finally my mother just says, $160,000. There is no pause, as if this is just a normal thing to say. I literally chuckle, like, is this a bit? And they aren't kidding. They want me to take care of it because I owe it to the family. And yes, I lose it a little. How do I ask? Why? What did he actually do? Turns out he got into this odd crypto trading thing, and it crashed, causing him to lose everything, and more. Brandon is always on point. But now it is my problem. I tell them right away that this will not happen. I'll help, but I'm not going to bail out that kind of disaster. Silence. Then my father asks, "So you're just leaving your brother out to dry?" I responded, "I'm not a bank." It gets worse from there. My mother starts crying. My father is all cold. Brandon is apparently hearing in and begins ranting that I am a selfish a-hole who never does anything for this family. I hang up when my mother says, "Well, we'll have to do what we have to do." I believe she just means they'll cut me off or something, which is hilarious considering I'm the one sending them money. So nothing happened for a day or two, only tense texts. I called Eli to check in. He swears he is okay. Grandma is making him pancakes. Cool. I'm annoyed, but not worried. Then things go odd. I call the house. Nobody picks up. I text nothing. Brandon sent me this one-liner. "Just hope you're happy now." I try not to read it. The next morning I received a call from an unfamiliar number with a local area code. I almost overlook it, but something inside tells me to pick it up. It is a woman. She introduces herself as a social worker and asks if I am Eli's father. I ask, "Yeah, what's going on?" She says he's well, but he was left outside a police station with a message. I honestly thought I had misheard her. I inquire if he's okay. She says yes, but she wants to ask me a few questions. She reads the note to me. It simply states, "Unwanted. Father lives abroad." There's nothing else. I honestly don't know what to say. I continue to inquire. "Where are my parents? Where's my son? What happened?" She responds, "Eli is fine. Someone dropped him off and left, and he's being looked after for now, but I need you to come get him, or arrange for someone." I simply go blank. I tried calling my parents, but nothing happened. Blocked. I even dial a different number, and it goes directly to voicemail. I tried messaging Brandon. He responds with a single line. "It's done. Don't bother coming home." I'm not the sort to panic, but I'm pissed. I called a friend who lives nearby. Ask him to stop by my folks' house to see what's up. He approaches me and says it's as if I never existed. Photos of myself and Eli gone. His toys, clothes, and even my old high school awards are gone. The house seems spotless, as if they had a cleaning company come in. Friend says he saw Brandon in the driveway and wanted to say hello. Brandon slammed the car door and walked away. I'm not even sure how to process it. I end up simply sitting there, staring at my phone, thinking it must be a prank, a setup, or something. My parents and Brandon have blocked all of my social media accounts. My aunt writes to me, "What's going on? Your mom is saying the most insane stuff about you, but she won't say what the worst part is." I can't even be furious at Eli's school or teachers, because they had no idea what was going on either. He was only present one day and gone the next. I suppose my mother called in ill for him and then never brought him back. I kept thinking, how did you get to this position when your own family just cuts you off so hard, and for what? For money that I do not have. I end up arranging for Eli to be picked up by a family friend, someone I genuinely trust, and calling him. He's okay. Confused but fine. Honestly, he's tougher than I am. The social worker is calm and says I should phone her back as soon as possible to complete paperwork. I am just numb. By this moment I'm trying one more time to see if my folks will respond. Nothing. No explanation, no apologies, and no fight. Brandon just posts a strange meme about false families and real ones step up, as if I should feel bad or something. My mother has blocked my number. My father leaves a voicemail that is literally 4 seconds of silence. So I sit there for a minute and then, for no apparent reason, start giggling. All this time, I believed if I did what they wanted, they'd finally see me as a member of the family, not simply a backup plan. Now it's evident that was never going to happen. They only wanted me around when something needed fixing. So I texted my friend, told him to keep Eli for a while, and then I began drafting a list of everything I could do to ensure that my parents and Brandon felt what they had just done. Not just a minor annoyance, but the kind of pressure that makes people regret they hadn't tried to manipulate me that way. I'm not even mad at this point. I'm just finished. Like I see it now. They made their decision. I'm ready to make mine, and I promise they won't like it. Part 2 is coming if anyone wants it, because this is simply the setup. I haven't started yet. Update 1. So, sure. I barely slept after my last post. NGL, I was just sitting there doom scrolling, thinking about what I could do to hit them where it hurts. I guess I've always known my parents were transactional. Even as a kid, everything revolved around, what have you done for us lately? But ditching my son? That's not simply crossing a line, it's burning the bridge and blaming me for the fire. I had a few days till I could travel back. First, we needed to resolve Eli's problem. He's good. I am now staying with my friend Jenna. She is a real one. Doesn't ask for specifics, simply says, tell me what you need. Jenna has her own family, so Eli is essentially being indulged with snacks and cartoons. I check in every day. He says he misses his dinosaur stickers and Nintendo, but he's otherwise fine, which is more than I can say for me. So I started digging. Not like Sherlock Holmes, just looking up old documents and emails. Here's a crazy fact. My parents put my name on a lot of their belongings years ago for emergencies. Karen and Mark do a classic maneuver. Always prepare for the worst, but only if it helps them. I'm not talking about a will, but rather things like home utilities, savings accounts, and car insurance. I never even considered it. They just handed me a 1-year binder and said, sign these. It's just in case something happens. I was about 20 and didn't question it. FR. Now I am looking at these papers and thinking, okay, this is leverage. I'm not going to do anything criminal, but I also don't want to continue paying for individuals who treat me like trash. I start with the utilities. Call the energy and water companies and inform them that I am removing my name from the accounts. They claim they need the other account holders to sign off. I simply answer, then shut it down when the next bill arrives. Same with the Wi-Fi and streaming accounts, which were primarily in my name anyway because my father believes anything online is a scam and has never learned how to create a password that isn't sunshine123. Next up is the family group chat. I do not go off. I merely posted a short message. Don't send money to mom and dad for Eli. He's not living there. A handful of cousins start asking about what happened, but I ignore them for the time being. I want the questions to begin. I want the bewilderment to spread to the rest of the family. Karen tries to kick me out of the chat but can't figure out how, so she abandons it. So I flew back to the States. I barely slept, and the first thing I do is go to my old house, knowing no one is there. Brandon posts his location on Snapchat like a moron, so I know he's at the gym while my folks are playing bingo. I walk up, and yes, it is strange. My key still works, which is simply laziness on their side. But the place feels false now. Everything with the words Caleb or Eli is gone. Not inside the garage, not in storage, just left. I search the trash cans and discover a few of Eli's old drawings. Some damaged toys, as if they flung everything out. I snap pictures, not for proof, but to remind myself that this isn't a nightmare I made up at some point. I hear a car approaching. Brandon is back earlier than expected. He walks out, sees me and waits there with his arms crossed, as if waiting for me to start something. I ask where Eli's belongings are. He shrugs. He says he doesn't know. Ask Mom. I wonder if he is proud of himself. He shrugs his eyes and continues. You should have just paid the debt. None of this would have happened. I move past him and he attempts to shoulder check me, so I shove him away. He appears surprised but does not push it. I instructed him to relocate his car. He smashes the door and plays loud music for no apparent reason. I leave. Not because I'm terrified, but because I have larger plans. First, I contacted my aunt. She's the only family member who has ever seemed to care about what happened to me. I tell her the basics. Not the whole police station thing, because I don't trust her not to panic out, but enough so she understands. She is surprised but yet responds quietly. Well, your mother has been acting strangely for months. Perhaps it is menopause. I have no idea what to say to that, so I just say, I'm not covering for them anymore. She says she'll see what she can do, which is aunt jargon for calling everyone she knows and gossiping. Which is alright with me. So, the next step is to shift the money. I look through my bank statements and start flagging every time I send money to my parents for things like groceries and school supplies. I text my family's former accountant. He is a second cousin. We are not close, but he has always remained neutral. I tell him to stop sending anything to my parents with my name on it, to freeze any joint assets, and to send me a report of the previous year. He says okay, but also wonders whether everything is fine, because my mother said I was having a breakdown. I'll simply respond, no. I'm just done paying for people who don't respect me. He doesn't argue, simply saying he'll do it over the next few days. The fallout begins. My parents phone my aunt, uncle, and even my ex, don't ask, hoping to get someone to calm me down. Brandon tries to direct message me, accusing me of being theatrical and damaging the family's reputation. I simply leave him to read. My uncle texts me something like, come to dinner. Let's talk this out. But I know they'll simply attempt to guilt trip me again. I skipped it. I began showing up at places I know Brandon frequents, the gym, the cheap pizza place, even his favorite bar. I don't say anything. I simply sit there, scrolling through my phone, letting him sweat. One time, he informs the bartender that I am stalking him. The bartender chuckles and says, dude, he's just eating fries. I notice him becoming increasingly jittery, as if he is waiting for me to go off. I want him to feel nervous. I want him to know that I'm not simply a voice on the phone. Meanwhile, I begin withdrawing from every group activity that my parents have ever gotten me into, including family BBQs and group gifts. Next time my mom offers to start a group FaceTime, I simply decline and SMS the entire family. I'm not talking to people who throw away their grandkids. No one responds, so people start to notice. It was a text from my cousin. Hey man, your dad's been calling me nonstop asking for help with the mortgage. Is something going on? I tell him, if you want to help, go ahead, but I'm out. He adds, nah, I got my own bills. And I simply responded, welcome to the club. Another friend told me that when my father sought to borrow money from his old poker mate, he was laughed out of the pub. My mother attempts to share some uplifting words on Facebook regarding children who abandon their families. My aunt claps back in the comments. I almost take a screenshot, but instead opt to let them devour each other alive. Brandon finally snapped one night. Shows arrive at Jenna's. He is familiar with the address and the issues that plague tiny towns. Starts hammering on the door, demanding at me to face him. Jenna's husband answers and urges him to leave. Brandon attempts to shove past him, gets shoved back and nearly falls over the porch. Jenna texts me something like, your brother's losing it. Maybe handle your business. I phone Brandon and tell him that if he ever shows up there again, I'll post photos of his side hustle on Instagram. He hangs up. What is the funniest part? My parents still do not call me personally. They simply send out group messages like, how could you do this to your own blood? And family means everything, and what would your grandmother think? I ignore every single one. I start to block numbers. I received a letter in the mail with my mother's handwriting. Do not even open it. Simply throw it in the garbage. And through it all, I'm not even mad, just concentrated. I want them to feel the full consequences of their actions. Not just for a week or a month, but long enough that people recall it whenever they check their bank account or go to the store and are unable to pay for things. So, here's the setup. I have more pieces to move. And I am just getting started. If anyone is still following this, I will provide an update once the actual pressure begins. Trust me, they are unprepared for what is to come. Update 2. So I assumed I'd gotten past the what the actual hell phase by now. But, honestly, every day brings a different taste of petty or desperate behavior from my parents' house. Have you ever noticed how some people don't even try to cover their mess once the cracks start showing? I drove by the old place last week, and the grass was already up to my knees. Paint is flaking. The mailbox was duct taped. My father is out front on the phone, pacing as if he is arguing with the entire world at once. I just continued driving. Not my circus anymore. Anyway, after I started removing my name from things and shutting off the money, it was as if the entire family network went into panic mode. I'm getting texts from my mom, uncle, and even a weird relative I haven't spoken with since high school. Some of them are showing concern. To be honest, most people are simply trying to find out where the cash flow went. My mom sent me one that simply says, "You're destroying the family. Like, girl, you basically abandoned my child on a sidewalk." But certainly, I'm the problem. Brandon tries to get in my face again at the supermarket. I'm in line for eggs, and a guy walks up acting rough. Says I'm making things worse and embarrassing them. I merely shrugged. Tell him to buy his own food once. He pushes my cart. I push him back. He looks at me as if he expects me to swing, but I give him that look and he walks away. The guy behind me in line just shakes his head and murmurs, "Families, man." What is the funniest part? My father actually phoned my ex approximately 3 times to warn her about my actions. She conveys to me by text, "Your dad's losing it. I don't care what you did, I'm not getting involved." I let her know, "Don't worry. I'll never put you in that spot. Just block his number if you want." She says, "Already did." So, it's no longer only about money. It's all about control. And they realize they're losing it. The family group chat is completely silent, with the exception of my aunt uploading cat gifs. My mother is sending all caps texts such as, "We are still your parents. You owe us respect." I just muted the chat. I'm not even upset at this point. Just petty. I begin selling. Anything with my name on it. Even if it results in a loss. The old car's title is no longer valid. The joint account for family emergencies has been deleted. Dad's extra phone line has been cancelled. When I get a call from an unknown number, I simply block it. Now the bills are piling up on them. I hear the electricity was turned off for a day, while they found out how to pay for it. The mortgage firm called my father at work. My mother is crying to my aunt, saying she never expected her own son to betray her. My aunt is over it. Just tells her to work it out for herself. I believe that was the first time I'd ever heard my mother say no. Brandon begins calling around attempting to borrow money. Facebook posts about certain people's true colors and false families. Nobody bites. I see him in the gym, wearing headphones and pretending I'm not there, but he keeps glancing over. I just sit on the seat and scroll through my phone, waiting for him to look up. He finally does, and I simply smile, wave, and return to my reps. He departs early at some point. I got a letter from my mother. Not an email, but a letter. Which is unusual for her. It's 3 pages of guilt-tripping about how difficult it was to raise me, how much they suffered, how I'm allowing Brandon to sink, and how my father, aged before his time, says if I don't help they'll have to make difficult decisions. I have not even finished reading it. I just put it in the junk drawer alongside expired coupons and takeout menus. Meanwhile, Eli is thriving with Jenna's family. I see him every day. We draw, play Mario Kart, and eat a lot of cookies. He occasionally asks about Grandma and Grandpa, but not in a sad way. Just as he notices they aren't present. I say they're busy. He shrugged and asked for another juice box. To be honest, I wish I had his level of coolness. Jenna informs me that Brandon came around again. She tried to start anything with her spouse in the driveway. This time, her spouse slammed the door on his face. Literally. Brandon yells through the door saying, "I'm ruining everything," and promising to make things right. Jenna laughs, tells him to grow up, and phones me. I simply respond, "Thanks for the heads up." So suddenly my folks are being rejected in their own neighborhood. People talk. It is a little town. Everyone knows that something happened. My mother used to throw these garden dinners every month. Now no one turns up. My father is acting as if nothing is wrong, yet I see him at the gas station attempting to negotiate with the cashier over lottery tickets. Brandon is sofa surfing. I heard from a friend that he tried to crash at their apartment and was told to find a job first. Lol. I stopped receiving the daily guilt texts. Now it's only the occasional, "When are you coming home?" or "We miss you." No mention of Eli. No apologies. There's no explanation. They still believe I'll crack first. This is never going to happen. My cousin Miquel is the only one who is truly honest with me. She arrives at my apartment one night with pizza. Just sits down and asks, "So, you really cut them off?" I responded, "Yeah, for good." She nods. I said, "Took you long enough." Then she tells me that my mother has been contacting her non-stop, pleading for help with bills and wailing about how I turned the entire family against her. Miquel just adds, "Maybe don't throw your grandkid out like garbage next time." So I push it further. I discovered that my parents have been receiving modest side gifts from their extended family for years, birthdays, holidays, and even just because. I start calling everyone and telling them what occurred. Not even in a dramatic way. Just facts. The majority of them are shocked. Some people are initially skeptical of my claims. However, a few others have seen my mother acting strangely recently. The gifts then stop coming. One uncle really calls and yells at my father for embarrassing the family. I wish I had seen that. Brandon tries to guilt trip me one more time. Shows up at my house with a sob story about how he's trying to rectify things but needs some assistance. I tell him to leave. He gets enraged and tries to slap the pizza box out of my hand. I shove him back and order him to go lost. He stands there for a second, as if waiting for me to calm down. I simply stare at him. He finally goes, slamming the door so fiercely that the frame vibrates. Now it's just me, Eli, and the silence. I'm not lonely. I'm simply done. Every move I make, every dollar I pull, it's as if they know I'm not playing anymore. My mother last texted me, "You're destroying the family." I just chuckled. Next, I have one last play. Something they won't see coming. But I'm almost looking forward to it. I want them to experience that every time they sit down to eat and realize there are only 3 of them. Nobody called. There is no one visiting. Nothing but the reflection of their own decisions. I'll publish again after it's finished. If you are following this, you will want to know how it ends. Final update. First and foremost, thank you to everyone who has persevered with this. NGL, I wasn't even going to update again, but people kept DMing me saying, "Bro, did you nuke them or what?" So, yes. Here's what happened when I really went for it. Strangely, my mother begins throwing signals in the most boomer-like manner conceivable immediately away. For example, she comments on a Facebook post I made around 4 years ago. Just one line. "Family always comes first." Then she tags me with 3 emoticons. Subtle, right? Then my father texted me for the first time in weeks. No, hi. No. How are you? Just a paragraph about how the family's name is jeopardized and you have to fix what you broke. I don't even respond. I just took a screenshot and sent it to Michelle with the caption, "LOL." So this is where the actual pressure exists. I pulled the final thread. Remember, I was still working on some old paperwork for the house, a couple of savings accounts, and car insurance. I had already removed my name from everything I could solo. But there was one final thing. My grandmother put up an old savings account specifically for emergencies. My parents always treated me as if it were their money, but it was also in my name. I went to the bank, requested a full withdrawal, split my portion, and left the remainder alone. I didn't even warn them. Didn't say anything. I know my mother checks that account once a week to ensure she has a backup plan in case Brandon gets into another issue. I called the mortgage company and said, "I'm out. I'm not responsible for any future payments." Not signing squat. The woman on the phone was quite cool. They said they will update the papers. I received a call from my father around 2 days later, yelling over the phone about how I was ruining their life. How could I accomplish this? I hung up. He calls back. I hung up again. He sends about 5 voicemails. None of them apologized. They were simply upset that he was losing control. Meanwhile, Brandon lives in his car. I heard it from a buddy who works at 7-Eleven. He's been asking around for a couch to crash on, but everyone is aware of what occurred. He tried to guilt my uncle into letting him stay, but was instructed to acquire a job first. He attempted to get to Eli's school, but the principal called and informed me that a relative was asking questions and appeared strange. I warned her not to let him approach Eli again. She agreed. Brandon called me afterwards. I tried to imply I was turning everyone against him. I had just said, "Maybe next time, don't let mom and dad throw my kid away like a piece of trash." In the meantime, my folks begin to exhibit unusual behavior during the holidays. For example, when my mother tries to organize Thanksgiving, just 2 cousins show up, one of whom leaves early. My dad acts as if nothing is wrong. He sits at the head of the table, looking through his phone and ignoring everyone. Michelle tells me that my mother called her afterwards, crying. She said she doesn't understand how we all became so harsh. Michelle informed her, "You did this to yourself." She hung up. They were severely affected by the social consequences. Neighbors stopped waving. Old pals stopped by. Heard my mother argue with a lady across the street about fake people. My father slammed the door when a church buddy arrived to drop off food. Brandon got into a shouting match with someone at the petrol station, apparently about $40. He pushed the person and was pushed back. Nearly fell into the windshield wiper bucket. Even the extended family is divided. Some aunts support me. Some people believe I should be the larger guy and fix things. I simply say, not my problem. I block everyone who attempts to guilt me. I don't care whether it's blood or not. I see folks at the supermarket who don't know what to say to me. I just nod and continue moving. Eli is good, by the way. He starts first grade next week, has already lost 2 teeth, and is enamored with his new bike. He occasionally asks about grandma, but not in a sad way. Just as he noticed, she vanished. I do not lie. I simply say, sometimes people make bad choices. He nods. Says, okay. Returns to his cartoon. I saw Brandon one last time at the pharmacy. He is scrounging for change at the counter. It appears rough. He notices me, walks up, and attempts to get closer. Says, I need to fix this. I remind him. You made your bed. He attempts to shove me. I shove him back harder. The clerk yells at us to get outside. Brandon simply shakes his head and leaves, with nothing. My parents sent me one final group text. Something about forgiveness, family, and how we'll regret it once they're gone. I do not reply. I exit the chat for good this time. I know they are spreading lies about me to anyone who will listen. But really, I do not care. I see now that they never wanted a son. Simply a backup plan. They're upset because I finally acted like a genuine person and not their safety blanket. So that's it. No huge Hollywood ending. There's no healing arc. This is just real life. I have a son. I found my tranquility. And they got exactly what they deserved. Every time they check their bank account or sit in their empty home, they'll understand why. And if they ever try anything again, I'll simply remind them of the one rule they gave me. Family means nothing unless you act like it. Thank you for reading. I don't need advice or compassion. I just wanted to prove to myself that I did this. I'm not apologizing. I'd do it again 10 times. My parents chose my sister's healing retreat over my valedictorian speech, so I exposed our family's secrets in my graduation speech. Have you ever met someone who could fill a room simply by opening their mouth, even if they weren't saying anything meaningful? That's Harper, my sister. She was the star of our family's never-ending show from the time she was born, loud, red-faced, wailing as if the world owed her something. And me? I was the understudy who never made it on stage. Not because I wasn't talented enough. Hell, I was better. But I didn't break anything. I did not cry at dinner. I didn't require assistance with every small thing. I just handled it. I finished my assignments, cleaned my own cuts, suppressed my tears, and smiled for photos, even though I was invisible in them. I used to think that if I worked hard enough and did everything correctly, someone would notice. They'd remark, "Hey Riley, thank you. You held this whole damn family together while we were busy chasing Harper around the country, fixing whatever mess she got herself into this time." That day never arrived. Instead, I received a pat on the head and a, "We're so proud of you, Em. You're just so easy." As if that was a compliment. Like being low maintenance meant I didn't require affection. Graduation was supposed to be the one time I got to shine. I worked for it, I deserved it. I remained up beyond 2 a.m., practically every night my senior year, pounding out calculus problems as Harper FaceTimed Mom from Bali to tell her how she was finally finding her center. I gave up parties, sports, and even sleep only to walk across the stage as valedictorian and hear my name announced over the loudspeaker, Riley Claire Watson. Number 1. Full scholarship, Ivy League bound. And maybe, just maybe, my parents would react the same way Harper does when she mentions starting a podcast. The call arrived 2 days before graduation. I was still in my gown when my phone rang and the word "Mom" flashed across the screen. I responded, expecting a pep talk. "It may be. We're so proud of you, honey." What I heard was her voice, airy and fluttery, as if she had just finished a glass of wine on the porch. "Hey sweetie," she said. "Listen, I wanted to talk to you about Saturday." I already knew, perhaps not in those exact words, but I felt it in my bones. The interval before disappointment. That brief moment before someone says something that will stay with you for years. "We won't be able to make it," she said, as if she were discussing a missed dentist visit. "Sam booked this yoga retreat in Sedona, and she really needs us right now. She's going through a lot." I did not say anything for a second. I just listened to the sound of her wind chimes from the other end. It felt like the cosmos was mocking me. "She needs you?" I asked, my voice as flat as a dry cracker. "She's processing some stuff. Her last retreat was canceled, and this one has this shaman she really connects with. We already paid for it, and you know how sensitive she gets when things don't go as planned." I wanted to shout. I wanted to tell her I didn't care about some barefoot man wearing a crystal necklace whispering affirmations into my sister's ears. I wanted to know if she had ever canceled anything for me. But I did not. Because that was not how it operated. Harper responded to the emergency. I was the backup generator. So I said, "Okay, cool." She paused. "Are you sure? You don't sound mad." "I'm not mad." Another falsehood. "So, what was the point?" She closed the call with a cherry. "We will FaceTime you, okay? We really love you. You are great, Em." I remained motionless for a minute after the screen went dark. I did not cry. I did not punch anything. I just sat there, holding my phone as if it were a dead fish. Then I stood up, approached my desk, and opened my laptop. I destroyed the draft speech I had written a week ago. The one with the thank yous and the "it takes a village" statements. The one in which I gave them credit. I began typing a new one. This time, the pace is slower. Sharper. With each keystroke, something inside me hardened. Not bitter, but crystal clear. They were not arriving. They went with Harper again. And I was not going to scream about it. I was determined to make sure everyone heard me regardless. Even them. Especially them. The thing about growing up with a sister like Harper is that your existence gradually becomes the silent gap between her dramatic chapters, as if you were nothing more than a commercial break during her primetime crises. You learn to live on the outskirts, just far enough to avoid casting a shadow on her limelight. I used to think it was normal. After all, every family has a golden child, correct? However, it took me years to realize that being the easy one was not a blessing. The eraser was slow. One missed birthday party, one "we'll make it up to you" at a time. My earliest memory of being replaced was not particularly tragic. Today was my 6th birthday. I had planned a little backyard celebration for a dozen students and a homemade cake that Mom promised we'd bake together. But when Harper awoke that morning with a sore throat, the entire situation changed. Mom glanced at me, her eyes filled with concern for Harper's well-being rather than mine. "We might need to cancel, sweetie," she whispered, pouring Harper ginger tea as if she were ill. We did not cancel, but she insisted that I cut the celebration short because Sam needs to rest. And I recall seeing my pals leave early with party favors that I didn't even get to dish out. It worsened as we grew older. Harper have a talent for disruption. During my junior year, I underwent minor surgery. Nothing major, just tonsillitis, outpatient. Dad said he'd take off work. Mom promised she would be there. But the night before, Harper was dumped by a guy named Austin. Or Aiden. I can't remember. And she had a complete emotional meltdown. I awoke from anesthesia to a nurse offering me juice alone. No parents. We just texted, "We'll swing by after we check on Sam." It's almost amazing how she managed to hijack events that had nothing to do with her. When I gave Kolaya my admission letter, which I had worked so hard for, she burst into tears at dinner because it reminded her that she had never been accepted to NYU and had always felt like the foolish one. She spoke it through tears, with her head bowed, like a humble martyr. The room moved to comfort her. My father actually remarked, "Let's not rub it in, Em." That moment stayed with me like a thorn I couldn't get out. You could think I disliked her, but I didn't. I pity her. I felt sorry for her because she really needed to be needed. How empty she must have felt if my joy resembled her failure. But pity has an expiration date. And mine hit the wall the moment my mother called about the yoga retreat. Something in me suddenly snapped. Not too loud. Not violent. Quiet. Cold. Focused. I didn't answer with wrath since I knew it would simply add to the story. Riley is being difficult. Riley is making it about her. Number I would give them nothing they could use to recast this as another Harper-centered epic. Instead, I maintained silence. Not the passive sort, but the weaponized one. The kind that does not beg, explain, or attempt to win. I channeled all of my rage into the one thing I could control. My words. I spent hours drafting, rewriting, deleting, and rewriting. The words had to be cutting enough to cut yet not overtly offensive. I didn't seek vengeance. I wanted the kind who grinned. The type that made you question if you were the one who misinterpreted something, even as you bled from it. By the way, graduating at the top of my class, number 13 out of everyone, did not feel as I expected. You might think you're invincible. But truthfully, it was just silent. Like the time before a storm, when everything seems too quiet. I no longer cared about the number, the medals, or even the acclaim. I just wanted one person in the audience to look up and see me. But they wouldn't be present. They'd be somewhere in the desert, breathing through their nostrils as some guy with a man bun instructed them to align their chakras. And honestly, it was fine. Because I now had no one to protect. I printed the final version of my speech late that night. It was after midnight, and the printer buzzed in the darkness, like a secret being born. I stared at the pages for a long time, reading the last paragraph repeatedly. Then I dropped the USB with the backup copy into a glass of water. What about the cloud file? Deleted. No copies. No redos. It was going to be live. Raw. Unrehearsed. I spoke it out loud. Not because anyone was listening, but because I wanted the words to exist in the air before they appeared in the room. Let's see if they finally hear me now. Graduation morning brought the kind of weather that makes you believe the cosmos is rooting for you. Clear sky, a pleasant breeze, no evidence of the chaos brewing behind the scenes of my lovely little cap and gown moment. A day when everything appears to be in order. I stood in front of the mirror, putting my honor cords over the stiff navy robe, trying to ignore the hollow ache in my stomach caused by who wouldn't be sitting in the audience. It was no longer a question. I hadn't gotten a text or a voicemail, not even a last-minute apology laden with guilt and just enough spin to make it appear as if I was the one overreacting. Instead, when I opened my phone to check the time, I noticed Harper's most recent Instagram post, which featured her legs crossed on a bright orange mat with a newborn goat resting on her lap. They were both bathed in desert sunlight as a smiling stranger took a shot that looked like it belonged on the cover of a wellness magazine. She had tagged the location as Sedona. The caption reads, "Feeling realigned. So proud of how far I've come." I did not even roll my eyes. I simply turned off the phone, placed it in my backpack and let the silence settle in. My parents were not coming. That wasn't a surprise. What surprised me was how numb I felt about it. There were no tears or fury, only a focused, acute emptiness, similar to the steady breath before a final shot. I had my speech in my folder, freshly printed, with no digital backups or second revisions. It was not a eulogy. But it could as well have been. The auditorium was full, buzzing and hectic in that joyous, end-of-an-era way that only happens when hundreds of students and their families come together to celebrate the conclusion of a shared chapter. Balloons bounced against the ceiling. Phones were lifted in all directions. Laughter resonated above the quiet hum of the school band warming up. I smiled at the few professors who waved as we lined up backstage. But my gut remained hollow. Every other graduate had someone prepared to yell their name, cry in the crowd and exclaim, "We're so proud of you, baby." I had an empty row, or two, and a goat practicing yoga 3 states away. When they finally said my name, Riley Claire Watson, valedictorian, there was a roar of clapping, polite yet strong, echoing against the gymnasium walls. I stepped onto the stage, my speech in one hand and a microphone in the other, my heels clicking slowly. I peered out over the sea of faces. Parents hold tissues. The grandparents clapped for too long. A younger sibling yawned on the first row. Every face was beaming with pride, love, hope. Except for the 2 I had spent 18 years attempting to impress. They were not in those chairs. They were synchronizing chakras in the desert. "Good afternoon," I said, speaking clearly but not loudly. "I know I'm supposed to stand up here and thank everyone who helped me get to this moment, and I will. But first, I want to talk about something nobody ever puts on the graduation checklist: loneliness." You could feel the ripple spread throughout the audience. A subtle shift occurred, as folks realized this wasn't going to be the standard cookie-cutter speech with Dr. Seuss references and promises to keep in touch indefinitely. I want to talk about what it means to do everything right every test, every assignment, every quiet decision, and still feel like you're clapping for yourself because no one else showed up. Several heads inclined. A teacher's eyes expanded. Someone stopped the recording. There are people who think being strong means being silent. That being dependable means you don't need help. That being the easy one means you'll never break. My voice did not shake. My hands didn't either. I'd like to thank everyone who taught me how to stand alone, especially those who were never there to hold me when I fell. You could have heard a pin drop. Some students applauded. A few hooted, half in disbelief, half in admiration. Mrs. is a single teacher. Henson, who had usually discreetly sneaked me sweets before tests, wiped her eye with a tissue she feigned not to have. I grinned then. Not a big phony smile, but just enough to convey, that was real. And then I strode off the platform as if I had somewhere better to be, heels resounding down the steps, the folder tucked under my arm like a sheathed weapon after battle. Backstage, nobody said much. Several pats on the back. One guy commented, "Damn, that was badass." I just nodded as if it was nothing. I sat down, got out my phone, and saw what I had been looking for. Not congratulations, but the aftermath. 3 missed calls. 2 from my mother, and 1 from Harper. A voicemail message flashed red at the top of the screen. I pressed play. Her voice sounded tense, somewhat harsh, and on the verge of shattering. "Riley, what the hell? How could you do that to us? Everyone's calling us. Everyone heard what you said. That was cruel. I don't understand why you would humiliate your family like that." She didn't apologize. She didn't ask if I was all right. They consistently used the same line. How could I do this to them? I didn't respond. I just played the message again, this time a little softer, allowing her words to resonate in the void she had left behind. When I arrived home that night, I turned out all of the lights. I skipped the customary processes, such as the shower, tea, and decompression rituals, which generally helped me shake off the day's weight. There was nothing to decompress. It had already burnt out of me on there, beneath those brilliant lights, in front of people who had finally heard what I had spent my entire life whispering into holes. I removed the robe and cords and placed them neatly folded on my desk, a mute memorial to the version of myself who once believed that hard work would be enough to earn a seat at their table. The calls arrived in waves, predictably spaced, as if they were timing themselves for maximum guilt delivery. First Mom. Then Dad. Then Harper. Then it's over again. Nobody left voicemails this time, possibly because they knew I wouldn't listen. I did not. I just let the phone vibrate across my dresser and watched the screen light up with names I had long since stopped identifying with comfort. They didn't call because they were worried. They were calling because I had interrupted the storyline. And in our family, that was the cardinal sin. Telling the truth, unfiltered, in front of strangers. I figured that was it for the night. That I could sleep in the modest silence I'd created for myself. But around 10:30, there was a knock on the door. The kind that sounds like someone wants to be let in while also letting you know they're already upset. I opened it to see Harper standing there. Full mascara application, a flawless foundation. As if she had just returned from an audition for the role of concerned sister. Her eyes were red, but not from crying. Rather, she had rubbed them raw enough to make it appear like she had cried. "Seriously," she began, before I could say anything. "What the hell was that?" I didn't respond. I just stepped aside and let her in because I knew she didn't ask for permission. She came for her performance. She walked the living room, arms swinging in that dramatic way she liked to show people how overwhelmed she was. "You have embarrassed us. Do you have any idea how you sounded up there? People are sending me texts. Our elderly neighbor forwarded me a tape. Riley, here's a clip." Nonetheless, I said nothing. Silence. I'd learnt that it rattles her more than yelling. She turned on me, her voice rising. "You made us look like monsters. We were simply trying to help. I needed the retreat. I've been coping with so much. And you made it all about yourself." That's when I laughed. Quiet. Not bitter. Just exhausted. The kind of laugh that lives in your throat when you realize the individual across from you is not just selfish, but also delusional. "You made my graduation about your goat yoga," I remarked, each word as deliberate and precise as a scalpel. "I gave one speech. One. And now suddenly, I'm the villain." Before she could react, the front door opened again, and there they were. Mom and Dad, as if she had summoned them via text. "Sweetheart," Mom murmured, already approaching me with her hands raised, like if she were entering a hostage negotiation. "We didn't want it to be like this. We just thought supporting Sam's healing." "Stop," I shouted, raising a hand. "Don't say healing journey one more time unless you want to hear what I really think about your guru-fueled parenting." Dad appeared to want to speak, but Mom jumped in again. As usual. "You don't understand what she's been through." "No," I replied, looking towards Harper. "I understand perfectly. You've all made sure of that. Every missed game, every ignored honor, Every time I needed you and you were too busy picking up her pieces. I understand exactly who matters. You're being unfair, Dad finally said. We tried to be there for both of you. No, I said, my voice harsher. You tried to make me your emotional insurance policy while you spent 20 years funding her identity crisis. Harper's mouth dropped open, but nothing came out. For once. Your healing journey is built on my silence, I remarked, locking gazes with her. And I'm done sponsoring it. The room went silent. Not the stillness of folks who have recently learnt something new. The silence of those who recognized they couldn't make this moment into anything other than what it was. I grabbed the remote and switched off the lamp next the couch, leaving the room in comfortable darkness. They all stood there awkwardly, still waiting for the version of me they knew. The one who would give in, smooth things over and apologize for telling too much truth. I'm cutting contact, I responded simply. Not forever. Just until you learn how to treat me like a daughter and not a background character in Sam's reality show. My mother was stunned, not by remorse or humiliation, but by the difficulty of being told no for the first time by a child who had never asked for anything. Dad gazed at her, then at me, and back again, as if he were waiting for a script. I grabbed my keys and approached the door. You're leaving? Harper questioned, her voice breaking. I paused in mid-step, turned just enough to catch their gaze, and said the one thing I knew would haunt them for longer than any speech or voicemail could. If you ever wonder why I didn't invite you to my wedding, you can play this moment back. The next morning dawned with an unearned silence, as if the universe had gone still, not out of peace, but because it was waiting for someone to decide what would happen next. I had not slept well. Not out of guilt. I was at peace with what I said, but because silence has a way of reverberating after years of swallowing everything you wanted to scream. I awoke without the need to scroll through the aftermath. There was no interest about who texted what or which distant family member called my name bold, selfish, or both. I threw on a hoodie, put on my shoes, and headed out for coffee, not out of habit, but out of necessity. Some days, all you need is the smell of something scorched and bitter in your palms to remember you're still alive. The air was cool, but not freezing, with that early morning calm that makes even the city appear too drowsy to be rude. I rounded the corner of my apartment building with keys still dangling in one hand. And there she was, sitting on the curb like a discarded marionette. At first I didn't recognize her. There's no yoga gear. There are no beautifully ripped sweatshirts or crystal necklaces. She wore no flowy pants or groomed hair, and her easy wave came organically every morning, she stated. She was dressed in simple jeans and a stretched-out college t-shirt that she had not earned. Her feet were bare against the concrete, and if she had bothered to put on makeup, it was gone. Harper appeared to have paused. Her life in the middle of a performance, and the mask had no time to catch up. She did not notice me right away. She was stooped over, arms wrapped about her knees, and her head sunk so low that it appeared she may collapse into herself and vanish completely. Then I heard it. Not a whimper, not a sniffle, but genuine sobbing. The kind that does not include explanations or scripted apologies. The type that simply tear out of you when there is nothing left to hold them in. I froze. I don't know how long I remained there, undecided whether to go back inside or continue strolling past her as if we were strangers. Part of me wished to demand an explanation. Another segment I just wanted to watch. And some little sliver, the one who remembers braiding each other's hair before school when we were 10, told me to sit down. So, I did. I strolled to the curb, lowered myself next her, and didn't say anything. I didn't ask, "What's wrong?" or "Are you okay?" because I knew better. Some questions do not need to be asked, particularly between siblings reared in a family where silence was not a luxury, but a necessity for survival. We sat like that for what seemed like hours, yet it couldn't have been more than 10 minutes. Her crying did not slow, nor did it become louder. She was not attempting to perform sadness. She wasn't looking to gain anything from it. For once there was no one to impress. Only me, the sidewalk, and the weight of the years between us. I did not touch her. I did not console her. Not because I didn't care, but because, for the first time, I no longer felt responsible for her emotions. I was not going to be the one to make things better. And I believe she recognized this at some level. That could be why she didn't attempt to explain. She did not offer excuses. She did not begin outlining all the reasons she believed she deserved grace. She just wailed, like if she'd ran out of distractions. We did not glance at each other. We didn't hug. We did not say the words that people think are important. Sorry. I love you. You were correct. None of this existed in the gap between us. What lived there was heavier, older, and quieter. We were not adversaries at that time. Not rivals. Only two women were reared under a roof where appreciation was limited and emotional presence depended on who shouted the loudest. Two ladies who had learnt that quiet could protect or destroy you, depending on who controlled it. And now that stillness sat between us like a living thing, neither cruel nor kind, but simply honest. I considered everything I could say. I considered assuring her I didn't regret the speech. I considered expressing that I was tired of being the good one, the sensible one, the one who always accommodated her disorder. I considered asking if she finally understood. But I said nothing. Because perhaps she did. Perhaps she didn't. Perhaps she cried because I finally said something. Perhaps she cried because I finally stopped.